The people who are wrong, but they're good, they're using it as metaphor. The people who are wrong, but they're bad because we think they're bad, they're just wrong. And I'm correct because I'm a scientist and I like to be correct. I just say that right now. Intentions aren't real, all right? What you're defining as intentions, that's more mystical nonsense. The modern, spiritual, secular type person must necessarily be doing watered down religion and must necessarily be doing watered down pseudoscience. This is silly. They're just doing something different. He's just finger blasting me with all these random definitions of scientific terms that don't mean anything because we're not talking science. Yeah, she's losing me here, right? She's appealing to science too much. She's losing me, all right? I'm changing sides, all right? I'm with Dave on this one now. That's when you know that you've jumped the gun and you're actually using scientific concepts. You're trying to appeal to science to validate your spiritual nonsense. That's just dumb. I'm feeling very chill right now. We're gonna watch this video. I'm not feeling very particularly pulled towards spirituality or science at the moment. I feel kind of neutral here. So I'm not sure if we're going to be thinking more protecting spiritual or protecting science at the moment. I'm not sure where the bias is going to be leaning. I feel kind of neutral on it at the moment, or maybe flexible, you know, easily to go into either side. I feel very calm. Let's take a look at this description first. From a channel called Professor Dave Explains. This just in. I think he's being snarky in his description. This just in. Quantum physics tells us that consciousness creates reality. Exclamation points here. The physical realm is just a mental construct. Another exclamation point. This means that you can heal yourself with the mind, and you can manifest your desires, and you can communicate with the universe to achieve ultimate transcendence. At least, that's what some of the world would have you believe. All those in the beginning were with exclamation points. This one is a period. Change in pace here. In actuality, physics says nothing of the sort. This is all some ridiculous narrative spewed by con men. Wow. And women. Let's not forget the con women that have come to be known as quantum mysticism. Together, let's identify the origin and figures with the figures like Deepak Chopra and trace its development over the past few decades, culminating in YouTube channels like Spirit Science and Actualized.org. These folks go beyond mere pseudoscience and act as literal cults. Cults are bad, don't you agree? Let's expose and disarm them together. Well, you gotta disarm these cults because they're cults and we've labeled them with a bad word. We haven't quite defined what a cult is. Maybe other people have different definitions and we'll find out together. Hopefully not too much negativity, but based on that description, brace yourselves. Okay, brace yourselves.
Hey everyone, so as many of you know, I am fascinated with the way the public perceives science, and in particular the broad pseudoscientific trends that crop up in our culture, influencing the masses to varying degrees. I like to identify them, diagnose them, and disarm them. Today I want to talk about one such flavor of pseudoscience related to the field of physics that has been picking up steam since the 1990s, and that is quantum mysticism. What the heck is quantum mysticism, you ask?
What is it?
Excellent question. It's challenging to encapsulate this phenomenon in a sentence, but I believe I can do it fairly well. The essence of quantum mysticism goes like this. Quantum physics is confusing, so it's magic. Therefore, if magic can be framed using the terminology of quantum physics, that magic is real.
Okay, well, let's start here. This is already, he's going off the deep end. I don't think this is a bad summation of what some people believe, right? In this sort of quantum mysticism sort of thing. Quantum mechanics is really strange. It's very difficult to explain some things. You've got weird phenomena that don't align with our natural way of viewing the world, nor the relativistic mechanics, right? Things are strange. So if that stuff is weird, and what we think is normal, and what we've been told is normal is not quite always true, then maybe there are other phenomena that we don't recognize. I think that's a fine way to summarize the way that some people think about it, but we don't want to confuse the layman thinking of quantum mysticism or whatever spiritual nonsense out there with the actual phenomena, right? We wouldn't want to just point to a random person on the street, ask them about science, and then, dismiss all of science because their understanding is lacking in science. So I do think this is a fine way to characterize some people, but I don't think it's sufficient to say that quantum mysticism necessarily is bad, but maybe he'll give us a little bit more definition of quantum mysticism and hopefully be a bit more charitable here. I don't think that's going to happen, though. Let's find out.
You see, quantum theory, from the perspective of the public, is shrouded in mystery. It is typically spoken about in an almost mystical tone, as though it were akin to the occult. This is largely due to the fact that it is very hard to understand. True comprehension is reserved for physicists and mathematicians who can solve complex equations, as the power of this theory lies exclusively in the math itself. Everyone else must be satisfied with hollow, often misleading conceptual explanations, and that is indeed the way this topic is typically explained to the masses, who demand explanations under the false assumption that this area of science must somehow be immediately and fully transparent to them. For whatever reason, people tend to be interested only in the frontier of scientific fields. So instead of wanting to learn about Newton's laws, which they would have a solid chance of understanding with some competence in basic high school algebra, they want to talk about things like quantum mechanics.
Yeah, and it seems like there's a problem because a lot of people want things to be true, or they want to find the most real theory, and apparently the newer ones are more real, which is not quite the case. They may be explaining more things, but the frontiers have this veneer of being more real. And we can say that Newtonian mechanics isn't true because we have relativistic mechanics, right? And then some people make the assumption that relativistic mechanics isn't true because in different cases, quantum mechanics is more accurate than relativistic mechanics. And, you know, it's a little bit silly, but there's just this driving force to want to have the most accurate, the most real, the most true information. And that's going to push people to mostly go directly to the more novel, new, interesting frontiers of science. Get your brain working, changes your assumption on things. Good conversation topics, I think. Yeah.
Which most of us have zero chance of fundamentally comprehending, given the lack of prerequisite knowledge faced by anyone without at least a bachelor's degree in physics. When media outlets attempt to satiate this desire to commune with the boundary between the known and unknown, they take lots of liberties and make lots of mistakes.
Too much
and
liberty.
The public brings a lot of baggage to the table. Even with seemingly professional pseudo-documentaries like What the Bleep Do We Know, the concepts are sorely misrepresented, and the viewer walks away with a false sense of comprehension, or worse still, a head full of lies.
A head full of lies. This is why we don't want to believe anything that anybody says, and we don't want to believe anything that we think, because we're just wrong, right? You're not experts in the field, and even if you were an expert in the field, it does not necessarily mean that it's reality, right? So we want to break free of this foundational stuckness of feeling that something is most true or more true than any other thing. If you're working within the system of science, you need a scientist to tell you what that stuff means. If you're trying to break free from science, don't appeal to science. That's just silly, right? So we have to be aware of this stuff, and it is a big issue when you start hearing spiritual people appealing to weird scientific things that they don't partially understand. It's unfortunate, but we do see it.
This confusion can lead people to purchase whimsical books and expensive seminars from ridiculous false prophets.
Nothing wrong with that.
Forego legitimate medical treatment in favor of unsubstantiated healers and gurus.
Probably something wrong with that. I mean, I think this is Reiki that he's showing. Probably not a problem if they aren't foregoing normal treatment. I don't know how common that is, and I wonder if there's a way to, like, I don't know if there are any studies or anything like that to figure out if people who are weird, have like weird spiritual beliefs, or maybe go to their church to get healing or prayer and all that stuff. How often do people do that in lieu, or to forego, by foregoing their normal scientific treatments and modern medicine treatments? I wonder how often people actually just disregard modern treatments in order to go into that stuff, right? I don't know. But if they aren't disregarding modern treatments, it's not a bad thing. There's nothing wrong with Reiki, and there's nothing wrong with spending a bunch of money. People can spend the money on whatever they want to spend money on, right?
And sometimes even get roped into a cult or two. There are many flavors of this fad, and a bit later we will get to the meat of the deception, which invariably involves misuse of the word quantum and deliberate misinterpretation of something called the double slit experiment. But I would like to start somewhere more fundamental.
That's, yeah, misusing quantum. I don't know if it's misusing quantum, right? But deliberate misinterpretation, I don't know if it's deliberate either. Ooh. Okay, keys to the quantum mechanics, quantum mysticism. Deliberate misinterpretation, how can we say it's deliberate? Misuse of the word quantum, how can we say it's misuse? They're using it in a particular way. We know what they mean. They know what they mean. Let non-physicists misunderstand quantum physics. True. It's not that bad. Who cares? And we don't need to beat up people for misunderstanding or not understanding in the way that one person finds it needs to be understood, right? There's no one particular way that everything must be understood, right? But there is a case for when there are bad outcomes to want to address those and help guide people, away from that. But there's a way that you could do that that's really snarky and bad and just mean, which, this hasn't been very mean. It's been a little bit, it hasn't been mean, it's not so bad taste yet. Maybe it will be. But yeah, there's a helpful way of sharing more information, and there's a very, very bad way to try to correct people by just calling them stupid and intellectually beating them up, essentially, which is not quite effective or
Let's
helpful.
begin with the core confusion that enables the whole show. Okay. Much like other scams and pseudoscience, it all stems from a misunderstanding of basic scientific concepts and terminology. In this case, it is the word energy.
So I wonder about this calling different things pseudoscience, and this is just I think this is just kind of messed up. We essentially, if you have a scientific mind, you say everything is scientific and, scientific stuff is science, and that's great. And then when somebody else has a different system that uses different values for evaluating the reality and has different ways of verifying the claims that they make in their own systems, we don't need to call them pseudoscience. They're not trying to be science. Not necessarily. Sometimes they are, and they are pseudoscience. We can say that. But not always, right? Sometimes people just have different methods of evaluating the world, and they use terminology differently, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? Just because we use energy means something to, commonplace people, and it just means something. And then there's like a very specific definition within physics, we could say. That's fine for physics to have their own specific definition. Their usage of that word, the mouth sounds that you make in physics doesn't need to step on the mouth sounds that other people use in different languages. And when I'm saying different languages, I mean different systems for evaluating the world. So just because they use energy, we'll see how he's using it. But people can use the word differently. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's a different system for evaluating the world. It doesn't need to be a bad way. It doesn't need to be a watered down version of your system. It doesn't need to be a misunderstanding of your system. You get what I'm saying here? So every way to evaluate the world is not trying to be science. Therefore, it's not necessarily pseudoscience. But we'll see. Maybe it is. Find out what he's saying here.
What is energy? Even just hearing that word out loud, dozens of connotations probably come to mind.
Yes, exactly.
Here is the way quantum mystics on the internet use the word incorrectly.
Incorrectly.
We talk about something called spirit, an energy, and an invisible force that seems to be controlling who and what we really are. Quantum physics emphasizes that the universe is not really split into two realms, a material realm and an energetic realm. Quantum physics reveals that everything is made out of energy. What we perceive as matter is actually an illusion of energy and light, that there is nothing physical.
So as you can see, to the quantum mystic, energy is a synonym for magic.
So this is interesting because I really don't like this trend, this tendency for somebody to say they're using the word incorrectly when he literally defines the word that he's using it, right? He gives the word and he defines it. That's not using a word incorrectly. That's just using a label. That's it. He defined the label. He used it. That's not incorrectly. He doesn't have to use the label in the way that you use the label. You can use the label however you like. And it's great to have a definition that's very clear in terms of science and physics. But that doesn't mean that everybody in the world must use that label in that way. Other people can use that label in whatever way they want to, right? It's totally fine. Other people are different people. They'll use the word how they like to use the word. So he's not using it incorrectly. He's defining the way that he's using the word. He's using it differently. That's fine.
Means whatever they want it to mean in order to sell to the suggestible viewer whatever it is that they're selling. But in some
everything must be profit motives, apparently. I don't know if this is necessarily true. What's my word? I don't think this is a truth that everybody is doing things for profit motives. I don't know if it's even necessary. We probably don't want to get into this trap of trying to define the intentions of other people, right? This is just bad. We don't need to divine their intentions based on their actions. You can ask them what their intentions are if you want their intentions, or you can just focus on their actions without bringing up intentions. You don't need to talk about their intentions. You don't need to try to slight them by saying that they're selling things, right? That's just messed up to tell people what they're doing, because most of them don't think that way. Now, maybe there are some common and they're actually just trying to sell something and they're being evil people, and when you tell them that they're trying to sell something, they smile and nod, and they know, everybody knows, and it's all good fun for them, I guess. That's fine, but that's not the case for everybody, and it's just messed up to put your own version of their intentions and step on whatever they think their version of intentions are when it's completely unnecessary. You can just talk about the effects, or you can just talk about the behavior without even bringing up intention.
Science, this word.
The guy is also profiting off of this. And this is a channel. This is a good channel. Right? The channel has good stats here. He's got a join button, so we can join and pay. So, I don't want to get too strange here, but it's kind of common where people criticize others for their intentions. It's a reflection of their own intentions. The whole deal with projection and all that other stuff. But I don't think he's necessarily wrong. The problem isn't him being wrong. The problem isn't him being hypocritical. I don't think he's being hypocritical. He's pointing out something he may be observing, but he just doesn't need to say anything about intentions. He can just state facts. He can just, even saying state facts is a little bit misleading. He can just talk about the behaviors that they're doing without pointing out intentions, and probably get his point across a lot better, and also not just be emotionally messed up by stepping on people's intentions.
Has a very specific definition, which we must learn now. For maximum effect, please purge yourself of every connotation you are aware of for the word energy, as the term has been completely convoluted by society, so we need to start from a blank slate. Act as if you've never heard this word before.
Okay.
Are you ready? Here it comes. Energy is the capacity to do work. The end.
So this is silliness, right? So he's telling us the scientific definition, which is great. But then he's saying specifically that the quantum mysticism, mystic people, these internet gurus are using the word incorrectly, right? But then he also has to go through all of these problems of telling us the definition of the word, right? So that means that literally everybody on the planet, okay, maybe not literally. I'm getting a little excited here. Most people in society, normal everyday society, using the word energy are using it wrong based on his criteria, because they don't use the word in this fashion, which is just dumb, right? No, physicists mean the word energy in a different way than commonplace lay people mean the word energy, which is different from what these internet gurus are saying, right? And we can appreciate that and use these words in different fashions, and not criticize certain parts of the population for using that label and calling them wrong, and then be charitable and nice to other parts of the population for using the label who are also wrong. Just kind of silly.
Now, to further clarify, we should also define work.
Okay.
Again, in society, this word means many things. It can refer to a profession, an action, or even a location. So let's again purge ourselves of these connotations so that we can learn what it means in science. Work refers to an action done on an object whereby an applied force causes a displacement of that object. So work is about motion. When you apply a force to an object and it moves, like pushing a box across the floor, you're doing work. So energy is the capacity to do work, which is what causes motion. And that's all there is to it. Energy is a property of a system and nothing more. To elucidate further still, we could highlight different forms of energy. Kinetic energy is the energy an object possesses by virtue of its motion, which can be transferred to other objects through collisions. Potential energy is the energy an object possesses by virtue of its position in a field. Lifting an object into the air increases its gravitational potential energy, which is then converted into kinetic energy as it falls, just the way a compressed spring has a lot of potential energy.
So I don't know if this is helpful for anybody at all, right? Most people probably already know all this stuff, right? So I don't want to impugn his personality. All right, okay. maybe he's had lots of useless arguments. Maybe he's being a little bit overly pedantic or very, scientism. Maybe. But also, maybe he's a kind-hearted person who knows how to dial it back when he's in normal life. Who knows? I don't know. Maybe. Okay. What was I saying? I was saying something. These are not. These may be helpful. I'm trying to figure out if this is helpful for the argument. Of course, he hasn't fully made the argument yet, so I can't quite tell. But I think that this may be just some good rhetorical device for all the people who are watching the video. I think we pointed out earlier, the quantum spiritual weirdos, like you and I. If you're watching this video, you're probably a spiritual weirdo. Probably not, who knows. If you're watching this video and you're like one of the quantum mystic folks, you're probably not going to watch the video, right? Most of the folks who are watching the video are not quantum weirdos. But the people who are watching this are probably science geeks in some fashion or other. And just by listing all of these random facts or random definitions of of potential energy, kinetic energy, and so on and so forth, it may just sort of spark that intellectual, oh, I remember that from science class in high school. Wow, oh yeah, kinetic energy. And this is probably not at all helpful for the argument. Probably. We'll find out if it does become important for the argument. I doubt it. Maybe the definition of energy and the definition of work are helpful for the argument that he's laying out. I still think misguided because he assumes that his definition is the only correct definition and everybody else is trying to be scientific. I don't think this is the case. They're doing different systems, but maybe they are. But this is just laying out what potential energy and kinetic energy are. This is just to make the audience feel like they're smart, I think, which is probably not. It's good. It's a good rhetorical point, but it's probably not helpful at all for making the point that he's trying to do.
Which is released as it expands. Thermal energy, or heat, is just a transfer of kinetic energy, and temperature is a measure of the average kinetic energy of the particles in a system.
Wow.
Hotter systems of particles are moving faster on average.
Wow.
Colder systems of particles are moving slower on average.
Mm-hmm.
Chemical energy is a kind of potential energy which describes the potential of some molecule to undergo a particular chemical reaction, which is simply a rearrangement of atoms.
Okay.
All of the above is explained in far greater detail over in my classical physics playlist, should you wish to learn about these concepts. Finally, matter itself is a form of energy, according to the most famous equation of all time, Einstein's E equals mc squared. E is energy, m is mass, and c is the speed of light, which is a big number, and when squared is an even bigger number. So matter times this big number equals lots of energy.
Okay.
But even this form of energy is not mystical in any way. Okay. When matter is converted to energy in a fusion reactor or a nuclear bomb, it is still the same phenomenon we have been describing. It can be defined rigorously and measured quantitatively. So
I wonder, just a side note here, I wonder how he's using the word mystical. I wonder if he's gone to like the mystical traditions and asked them to define the word, or if he's using it in some way that is contradicting the actual more rigorous definition that actual mystical traditions would be using. And of course, the mystics would be using that same type of argument against him because people are using this word in very different ways. And he's just assuming that mystical means mysterious, I guess, which doesn't quite necessarily mean that, but I wonder if he's like consulted any mystical tradition to use the particular usage of that word, or if he's just making up his own random meaning and being a layman in terms of mysticism and taking down their arguments as a layman in the same way that the mystics would be laymen in science and they're taking down science as laymen, which is just a silly way of going about it. But of course, I doubt he sees that, and I doubt anybody else would ever think about that. So, just
So
a
even in
curiosity.
this abstract context, it is never ill-defined or vague. So you see, when we say everything is energy, it's actually a true statement, because matter is a form of energy. But this does not mean that there is a magical spiritual world. It does not mean you can heal yourself with your mind, or any of the other bogus claims we will investigate in a moment.
Bogus.
Energy is not an object. It is not a substance. It is not an essence, or a life force, or a magical realm. It is a property of an object or system that can be transferred into another object or system, typically in the form of work. That's what energy is, and that's the only thing that energy is. Unfortunately, colloquial usage of the word energy has muddied and obscured this definition. People say things like, this
Well, if we're being very charitable to anybody else, if we're being very charitable to systems, if we were not just trying to dunk on people and be pedantic middle schoolers in the way that you're thinking about it, you might actually consult other traditions to see how they use the words and not just straw man. But yeah, one can hope, maybe one day people are doing this. Maybe he's not doing that. Maybe he'll never do that. Maybe nobody will ever do that. We're here to see and figure out how the world is working and how other people think about these things and what we see.
This room has such good energy.
Good energy in the room.
This is a metaphorical usage of the
Is it a metaphor? Oh my goodness. Oh no. Oh my gosh. Oh no. Oh no. He's doing the thing that we just talked about. He's doing, right? He said that mystics are using the word wrong. Mystics are wrong when they use the word. Everybody else, metaphor. You're using it as a metaphor. You're using it as a metaphor. Oh, it's okay for you to use energy however you want to use energy. It's a metaphor. And it really is referencing what I'm saying. It really is truly energy. And everybody else is wrong. The mystics are wrong for using it in their way. They're not using it as a metaphor. They're wrong. You're not wrong. You're using it as a metaphor. You're okay. You're special. You're cool. You're one of the smart guys like us. The mystics, though, they're bad. Is he aware that the new term and idea of energy possibly predates all scientific dictionaries? True. Yeah. If we talk about energy in terms of this sort of mystical stuff, is probably been there well before any sort of rigorous scientific definitions of the word energy. And yeah, a lot of mystical people do like to cite early usages of the words or etymology, which, as you all know, I'm strongly against. I do not like etymology, nor do I like puns, another common thing for mystics. But it's true, the mystics will certainly cite the original usage of words, going well beyond the scientific usage of the words. It's a silly, nonsensical game to be stuck on the labels. We can see beneath the labels and look at the actual phenomena that the people are referring to. And we can recognize that scientists are referring to something different, normal lay people are referring to something different, and mystics are referring to something different. These aren't metaphors for each other. They aren't wrong. They aren't referring to the same thing. They're different things. We can notice that. But if we want to get stuck and say, well, the people who are wrong but they're good, they're using it as metaphor. The people who are wrong but they're bad because we think they're bad, they're just wrong. And I'm correct because I'm a scientist and I like to be correct. Silliness.
Word, which is acceptable if acknowledged as strictly metaphorical. It means that one gets a good impression from the room. It conveys a feeling in a fun, poetic way.
Poetic.
It does not mean that there is a literal substance emanating from the room that we call good energy, which is magically perceived by your third eye in some way that science can't comprehend.
He doesn't, that was being a little snarky there. I guess I'm being also a little snarky here, but magically perceived by the third eye. Maybe no. He can't just. I don't think it's appropriate for him to just throw in random mystical sounding things to try to dunk on mystical people because he doesn't understand what the words mean or what they refer to. I think that's just a slimy tactic here, but I imagine that we'll see.
Further compounding the confusion is the fact that in physics, quantitative measurements of energy, in particular potential energy, can have positive or negative values. Positive means greater than 0, negative means less than 0. It's just math and the way we define systems in physics. By sheer linguistic coincidence, we also use the word positive to mean good and negative to mean bad, as in having a positive or negative experience. But these two connotations are totally unrelated. So when people remove the concept of positive or negative energy from the arithmetic domain in which it has actual meaning and take these phrases to mean good or bad energy, the result is totally meaningless. There is no such thing as good energy or bad energy. There is no context in which this makes any sense except the strictly metaphorical.
So this is so dumb. I mean, no offense. I mean, maybe I'm being a little harsh here. But you know, the way that he's speaking, it seems to be very harsh, and I'm getting that energy. I'm absorbing that energy, and now I'm throwing it back, and I don't like it very much. So hopefully we can reel that back in. But this is so dumb. Dang it. He's saying that it's so dumb, right? People are using the word differently. And it's not only acceptable when they use the word as a metaphor for science. If you talk to normal people, they're not using this word as a metaphor. Right? They're saying energy as an energy. They mean something. And if you talk to mystics, they mean something different again. We can just keep going over that same point over and over again. It's just annoying to have people step on others' definitions, right? I don't like the idea of stepping on what other people mean as opposed to actually just listening to the person to hear what they're talking about, right? If we can do that. Or we can just not appeal to any definitions and just ignore any linguistic tinges or whatever and just talk about the phenomena that they're referring to and take down the phenomena, I suppose. But it does mean something to say good energy or bad energy. That means something. It is a meaningful statement. It may not be a helpful statement in science, right? It may not be a useful statement in science because science doesn't really have good or bad defined in any particular way, but that doesn't mean it's a meaningless statement. It's just not meaningful in your way of thinking. But there are other ways of thinking, obviously. And he's going around pure masochism. Oh my goodness. I mean, I don't know. I was feeling quite neutral and calm earlier, and we were 10 minutes in. I feel like I've paused quite a lot, and I'm already feeling quite negative. I've got the bad energy from this guy. I don't think we're going to last very long, but hopefully he gets to some actual arguments. We'll find out.
When these terms are used improperly, it is simply an unfortunate side effect of allowing words to have multiple meanings in a language. The literalization of this metaphorical usage confuses people and renders them susceptible to cranks and con men who exploit this confusion for financial gain.
To use words in multiple ways is not necessarily confusion. Sometimes it's a helpful way of doing things. Why is he saying this, allowing the word to have multiple meanings? Do we want some sort of authoritarian restrictions on our language so that everyone must use the words in one particular way that is sanctified by some system of scientists who bless us for using words in particular? Is this what we want? It just seems a little strange to say that.
Of this metaphorical usage confuses people and renders them susceptible to cranks and con men who exploit this confusion for financial gain. Speaking of
oh man, that's more of the financial gains. It's not. I mean, some people do it for financial gains, and I think that's fine. Again, I don't like this idea of appealing to people's intentions. It's not necessary to do. We can take down their ideas without trying to cite their intentions, because we can be very wrong with the intentions, and that's just adding unnecessary harm and unnecessary problems to this whole thing that we're doing. We don't need to cite intentions. Intentions aren't real, man. We can just say that right now. Intentions aren't real, all right? What you're defining as intentions, that's more mystical nonsense, all right? It's just things happening. And if we want to if we want to change the behavior, if we want to really get to the issue, get to the root of this problem, we can not broaden our field of vision by talking about intentions, which is this magical thing that has no relation to what's actually happening in reality. We can just talk about what's happening in reality. We can talk about behaviors and just stick there, and we can take down the behaviors, as opposed to bringing up extras, intentions, and confusing people by getting well beyond the bounds of our actual argument. It's just silliness.
And con men, let's get to them now.
Okay.
I want to start with one of the primary figures, if not the primary figure, responsible for the popularization of quantum mysticism in the 1990s.
Deepak.
That is the glammed out guru himself, Deepak Chopra. Deepak rose to prominence on the success of his 1993 book, Ageless Body, Timeless Mind, The Quantum Alternative to Growing Old. This, along with his previous book called Quantum Healing, piggybacked on the broader New Age movement that was picking up steam, and he rode the tidal wave of science-flavored, self-help themed snake oil to significant fame and fortune. As you can see, quantum is a very important buzzword for this brand of deception, and it only serves to disguise mysticism as science. Given that Chopra has published nearly 100 books, there is no time to go into every single thing he's written, nor would I ever subject myself to that kind of torture. But a pervading theme across his body of work is the power of the mind. The mind, according to him, has limitless power in healing oneself, as well as shaping or even manifesting aspects of physical reality. He describes the phenomenon of perfect health, the title of another one of his books, and a selling point for his ultra-expensive wellness retreats. He advertises that those who read or attend and learn these techniques, which we could call sorcery,
I think he's saying that it's bad to be expensive for some reason. Interesting.
can be totally free of disease.
Is the claim that anybody who does something mystical or magical should be free, or anything educational should be free? I wonder how much. I just don't understand the intention there with bringing up money at all. It's more of this muddy sort of nonsense. To bring up money, to bring up intentions is completely unnecessary and besides the point, I think. And he's making everything much more confusing by obfuscating what he's actually trying to say. I wonder what the intention there is with the money deal. What does he want us to see, or what does he want us to understand by pointing out that some people make money off of doing their job? I don't know.
Never feel pain, and even halt the aging process, all simply with the mind. Of course, it seems that even Deepak himself was unable to put that last technique into practice, as he is 74 years old, and he looks his age.
Dang, that's messed up. Okay, so you can be free of disease.
Be free of disease, never feel
pain,
and even halt the aging process.
And stop aging. So I wonder if he took the time to figure out what Deepak actually means by these things. I'm going to guess he doesn't mean exactly what it sounds like he means, right? If we take it from a scientific perspective and we use all those words in the scientific sense, I'm going to guess he doesn't mean those things. Maybe he does. Maybe he does. Maybe he directly means you'll never have diseases. Maybe he directly means that you'll never have the physical, pathways of pain are going to stop. And maybe he literally means that the aging process will stop in the scientific sense. Possibly. Or maybe he means something different. I've never read Deepak's books before. I wonder if our friend here, Professor Dave, has read any, maybe he can help us out. Tell us if Deepak has any different definitions, or if he means them in the same way that you think that they mean them.
Process, all simply with the mind. Of course, it seems that even Deepak himself was unable to put that last technique into practice, as he is 74 years old and he looks his age.
I think that's just nasty. I can't tell. I think that's just nastiness, though, right? Just look at him and say he's old? That just sounds kind of nasty. It sounded nasty. I don't know if it necessarily is, but it sounds kind of nasty.
His other favorite thing to talk about is how physics tells us that consciousness creates reality, another hallmark of the quantum mystic. Here's a taste.
There is no universe. It's a human construct. There is no body. It's a human construct for a mode of knowing and perception. There are no electromagnetic fields or molecules or atoms or waves of particles. These are human constructs for modes of knowing and experience in human consciousness.
Yep.
The only thing we can say with certainty about the universe, what's it made of, is it's made of nothing. Non-locality, if you tickle...
Okay, so he's saying multiple things here before we get into nothingness. Most good scientists are instrumentalists, if you guys are familiar with this sort of for philosophical foundations of science or physics. An instrumentalist would be saying that physics, science are creating models which are helpful for understanding the world, but they aren't real, right? So a physicist would say there are no fields, there are no particles, all this stuff isn't real. That's not what the real reality is. We don't have access to true reality in some, direct sense. We use these as instruments for understanding the behavior of reality. A lot of physicists feel this way. Most scientists are instrumentalists, so they would be saying that exact same thing that Deepak has just said. Now, maybe there are implications that Deepak is going towards that don't align with what the scientist implications are, but just based on that, this is pretty well aligned with broad, normal scientific thinking. But of course, the layperson is confused because they don't understand science and they've never done any philosophy of science. They think that science is true or real or pointing to reality as opposed to some sort of instrumental way of understanding reality. The next thing he said was something about nothingness. I don't know what he means by nothingness, so I can't say.
The universe here, it laughs there. If you ever ask a question here, it answers there because consciousness non-locally is correlated.
Non-locality.
That's the deeper question. There's mathematics to prove that.
So as we can see, even for those who aren't specifically looking to be healed, there is still plenty to bait you with. The selling points of consciousness creating reality pretty much write themselves.
I wonder what he means by reality. It's usually pretty clearly defined, what you perceive. And that seems pretty clear enough. Consciousness creates what you perceive, right? Most people, spiritual people kind of have this sort of notion. They have different definitions of what reality is. So there's nothing very controversial there if you just understand what people mean by reality. But again, you can get stuck on the labels and then talk about what physicists mean by reality and what lay physicists really mean by reality and what actual physicists mean by reality and then what these spiritual people mean by reality, and then what lay people mean by reality. And it's just different labels to refer to vastly different things. So same label to refer to vastly different things. And there's nothing wrong with having a label that refers to something different.
Realizing your infinite potential, manifesting your desires. These are all attractive notions which can ensnare suggestible people who are dissatisfied with their lives or otherwise overwhelmed by reality. It's emptiness disguised as transcendental self-improvement.
Okay, so emptiness described as transcendental self-improvement. I don't think that Deepak would disagree with that. A lot of people are okay with emptiness and transcendental self-improvement, right? It's not yourself that's improving; it's something else. But I think he meant that as known. But yeah, I think most people would agree with that. People are just dissatisfied. Oh, he's just now he's making a mockery of the people who believe in Deepak Chopra stuff and saying that they're dissatisfied. Again, we don't want to pathologize people. Do you know the idea of pathologizing people? Just calling them insane or calling them psychotic or schizophrenic or whatever words that people like to use. In this case, he's not going that far, but he's saying that they're dissatisfied. So he's saying that a person must be dissatisfied with life or overwhelmed by reality. These are the words that he used. They must be in a bad state essentially in order to believe these things. This is the connotation here. So that then now we can point to anybody who believes or who follows. Belief wouldn't be the right word if you ask these type of people. Anybody who holds any of this sort of quantum weirdness and spiritual nonsense, anybody who holds these positions at any particular time, we could just point at them and say that they must be dissatisfied with life or they must have been dissatisfied with life and this is just some sort of some nonsensical cope for how overwhelming reality is, and it must be dismissed in that way. It's just another slimy tactic to make people feel bad and to create this division of these are the folks who are good, they understand rationality, and these are the folks who are bad, and they're going against rationality. It's kind of the idea that we're getting towards here. Now you're connecting it to Scientology? Okay, Scientology.
For Scientology and other successful criminal organizations. To be fair, not every quantum mystic has their own cult, but some of them do. And even those that don't, should we really look the other way when people make a fortune from deliberately misleading the public?
Okay, silliness again. The way that he framed that was really, really awful and toxic, right? Some of them don't have cults, but the few that do, we want to point them out. It'd be nice if he presented numbers or if he had some sort of statistics or something to back it up, because the way that he's framing it makes it sound like he's trying to be nice for the sake of it. But he's really saying that everybody is having a cult, right? You get this sort of implications of it. And then, of course, he's saying that Deepak Chopra is deliberately misinforming people as if Deepak doesn't believe these things. Obviously, Deepak doesn't believe these things too. Have you ever seen him talk before? Maybe he doesn't. I don't know. We don't need to try to appeal to Deepak's intentions and saying that he intends to be making a lot of money and he's just a fraudster in that sense. That is not important for the argument. We can take down his argument, if we can, directly without trying to go to his intentions. It's completely unnecessary to try to muddy the waters by magically divining his intentions.
How is it that they are able to do this? The success of Deepak stems from two things. First, he uses his Indian identity and calm, calculated manner of speech to put out an air of ancient Eastern wisdom.
I really feel bad about what he just said there, and I don't know how to express that for people who aren't aware of this sort of thing or who aren't sensitive, I guess, to this sort of thing that he's saying. But that was just racist, right? That's just like on a really just emotional level. That's just messed up, right? I want to say stronger words. That's just messed up. Like, we're just pointing out character traits of Deepak Chopra and then also like random facts about his history, right? He happens to be Indian, and saying that he's using that as a manipulation tool to win people over. Why do we don't need to bring up this random stuff. It's completely unnecessary. And I don't think Deepak Chopra is like cashing in on being Indian, right? He just happens to be a calm person and have a soft way of speaking. There's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with having a particular personality. There's nothing wrong with having grown up in a different country, right? Or I don't even know where he grew up, so I'm not sure if he grew up in India or not. There's nothing wrong with being Indian and then coming to the West and talking about stuff, right? He's not selling Eastern mysticism. He's not putting on a veneer of Eastern ideas. He just happens to be Indian. Why even bring that up? I don't know. Personally, emotionally, just that's just messed up to say.
To the untrained ear, he sounds like a wise sage. And he also was at one point
He sounds like a wise sage just because he's kind of calm and Indian. Do we see the messed up? Do we see why that's messed up? I don't know if we need to like maybe have a whole day of like racism and try to untangle like how screwed up that is, and like have a very clean way of translating that sort of emotional whatever into sort of basic logical or linear linguistic way of conveying that information of why that's really messed up to say. But hopefully some people get that and understand that's really just messed up.
Real doctor, so he appears to have credibility.
He used to be a real doctor.
Second, he is a third-degree black belt in the art of pseudoscientific word salad. He may be the best there's ever been at this impressive skill. He knows precisely which buzzwords to use and in precisely which combinations so as to present what sounds to many like profound truths.
I like this. It's very funny. He's precise with his word salad. Do we see the contradiction? Very funny. I think it's very funny. It's just a little bit amusing. Again, we're dividing his intentions. Maybe his word salad means a lot of things to a lot of other people, right? Just because it's not precise linguistically in the language game that you're playing, in the scientific logical language game that you're playing, doesn't mean it's not precise, right? It can have precision just in different ways, right? These things are precise, can be precise, not necessarily. There are lots of sort of things that seem like word salad on the surface if you're only looking at it in the sort of normal, logical, linear, intellectual physics type of way. But if you look at it with a different thing in mind, if you look at it sort of emotionally, if you look at it aesthetically, if you look at it in otherwise intuitive fashion, spiritually, whatever, it is precise. It can be precise. It can be very, very precise. It's just not intellectually precise. Those are different things. You can have emotions be very precise. You can have music be very precise without it cleanly being translated into logic or linear thinking. It doesn't mean it's not precise if it can't be translated to your way of thinking. You just need to be breaking free from your way of thinking. It's not the only way to think.
When in reality, most of what he says is utterly meaningless. In fact, there is a Deepak Chopra quote generator online called Wisdom of Chopra, which is programmed with vocabulary from his Twitter feed and equipped with a randomizer, which will
Nature fears subjective actions.
spit out randomly generated blocks of text that are completely indistinguishable from what he actually says. Here, I'll show you.
Okay, we find the real Deepak. Okay. I don't think we can do it.
These are all statements that were randomly generated for me by Wisdom of Chopra, except one, which is something Deepak actually said.
Okay, which one? Let's see if any of these have any ring to them. Experiential truth constructs intricate external reality. Okay. Imagination imparts reality to the barrier of sensations. Your heart quiets karmic balance. What? Attention and intention are the mechanics of manifestation. Okay. True identity is a modality of the expansion of opportunities. True identity is a modality of expansion of opportunities. Huh? Number 4 is the one that actually makes sense, right? The other ones just don't make any sense. So as far as I can tell, only 4 I can get some sort of meaning from at all. The other ones just don't make any sense. So I don't know if that's actually Deepak's. It could very well be a random word generator, and but these other ones just don't make any sense at all. At least in any sense that I know how to make sense of anything. But okay, well, that's replacing our bets. Replacing our bets on number 4. We'll see if this is a big trick. It may have been a big meme here. Even the other ones make some sense. How dare I make his own words still meaningful when they're random? I mean, some things could be meaningful and randomized, right? I like there's some AI things that you could put in like random spiritual nonsense, and then it'll spit out more random spiritual nonsense. It's not actually random, but it's AI stuff generated. And it's interesting because like this doesn't go against the idea of a lot of the spiritual teachings, right? The fact that you can get meaning out of something random, or the fact that you can get meaning out of completely nothing, is a point for the spiritual folks. This is kind of half of what they're saying most of the time. They're saying it's all meaningless, right? It's all empty, it's all nonsense. And you place the meaning where you see the meaning. So you can divine meaning as you wish. It's kind of a big point of a lot of the spiritual teachings. So if you get something that's completely meaningless and you see meaning into it, that's a very good thing. That's not a point against it, but who knows? We'll see.
See if you can pick out the genuine quote.
Okay. I like elevator music. I'm a fan of this. Bossa.
And here it is.
Number 4.
Did you
Well, there
get
you
it?
go. Yeah.
Don't worry if you didn't. You're not missing anything. So as you can see, it's a simple
So interesting. He just says, "Don't worry if you didn't." I wonder, like, how important it is to him that people can't get that. Because I don't know what that shows, right? I don't know what it shows that I could pick out the one that was correct. Even Benevolent Elephant could pick out the one that was correct. I don't know what that shows, and I don't know what it shows that, or if we couldn't pick out the one that was correct. I don't know what this is showing. So I wish he would actually put that out there to tell us what it would prove if we could figure out the right ones, or what it would prove if we could not figure out the right one. You pulled out quote generator here. Transcendence is at the heart of infinite sexual energy. If Frank Yang said it. Transcendence is at the heart of infinite sexual energy. Yeah, I don't think that's a bad one. I'd probably think that was a real quote, right? Maybe not infinite sexual energy. Transcendence is at the heart of sexual energy. If someone just said that, get rid of the infinite, I'd be like, I think they're onto something here. I think they're onto something. But Frank Yang said it. He had to add a little extra expletives, a little bit more, talk about, Anyway, you know Frank Yang, right? We all know
formula.
Frank Yang.
Dazzle people with spiritual sounding nonsense until their eyes glaze over and they open up their wallets nice and wide.
Wow. Perceptual reality is the wisdom of an exponential life. Okay, this is nonsense. What is this silliness? Okay.
And given Chopra's net worth of $150 million, it would seem that it is quite an effective formula as well. You see, this particular flavor of gibberish resonates strongly with a certain type of person. This would be the secular individual who is filled with the longing for worship, but has no institutionalized God to put it upon.
Secular individual who needs worship. You read this some time ago in German, Linguistic Relativity. The hypothesis of linguistic relativity, also known as the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, Whorfism, is a principle suggesting that the structure of language affects the speaker's worldview or cognition. Thus, people's perceptions of reality are relative to their spoken language, of course. However, the idea did not originate with this guy, rather German, okay, blah, 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 blah. Often stated as two forms. Strong hypothesis referred to linguistic determinism, held by some early linguists. Okay, strong version, linguistic determinism. Language determines thought, and that linguistic categories limit and determine cognitive categories. This version is agreed to be false generally by most people, and the weak version says that linguistic categories influence the thought and decisions. I think this is, I hold this, I think that the way that we conceptualize things certainly shapes the way that we view the world, right? It changes our worldview, it changes the way that we can think. Yeah, I'd be on board with this sort of thing. Linguistic relativity. Yeah, I'm on board with it.
We all possess certain neural proclivities towards seeking and affirming divinity. And to this end, quantum mysticism offers the universe as God.
How do we show that this is true or not true? I think it's complete nonsense. I don't believe it for 1 second. I don't think that everyone is wired to want divinity, to seek or affirm divinity. I personally don't like God. I've never been religious at all. I guess if somebody wants to just step on my own beliefs and tell me that I'm being religious by going over this, quantum weirdness and drinking tea a lot, maybe, whatever. But that's not, I don't feel at all any urge to look for something divine, magical, mystical, any of this sort of nonsense. And I don't know if everybody feels that way. I'm fairly sure not everybody feels that way. Maybe a lot of people. But not everybody. Is it hardwired? How do we show that this is something that's true? How do we show that? What could we show to make it clear that it's not the case that everybody wants to seek or affirm divinity? I wonder. I don't know.
Along with all the
Skeptical.
transcendence, permanence, interconnectedness, and self-empowerment, without any of the burdens of organized religion. It's a vapid stand-in for spirituality that avoids the outdated social practices and conservatism of the more popular faiths, but
It's a vapid stand-in for spirituality. Oh my goodness. My guy's getting real angry here with the spirituality. Why is it vapid? Why is it a stand-in for spirituality of religion? I don't understand this again. So he's doing that same thing where he thinks that since some people are doing things and they're modern folks and they're mostly secular folks, and they have these ideas that are kind of vaguely mystical, that must be similar to the mysticism of traditional religions. Why does he think this? And why does he think that any investigation of the world must be similar to his investigation of the world through physics? And in both cases, they're watered down wrong versions, bad versions. So the modern spiritual secular type person must necessarily be doing watered down religion and must necessarily be doing watered down pseudoscience. This is silly. They're just doing something different. I sound angry. Yeah, maybe I should stop. I don't like this guy. This is our friend Professor Dave. He is explaining why quantum mysticism is stupid. It's in the title. The name is Quantum Mysticism is Stupid. And he's not listening to people. He's shoehorning beliefs based on certain labels and maybe making weird connections based on some particular behaviors and assuming that modern spiritual people are trying to do science and trying to be spiritual, trying to be religious, I guess. I don't know. He thinks there's some similarity there, and Therefore, one must be vapid spirituality, a vapid, watered down version of religion, and it must be pseudoscience because it doesn't align with his strict, probably not very strict definition of what science and religion are. Of course, it's stupid. What else could it be? Okay, get out of here, disciple. Disciple knows what stupid means. Disciple is being silly. Okay, anybody watching this, disciple is being silly. He means stupid as in not necessarily tied it to linguistics or logic, right? But disciple is deliberately, I can divine his meaning, I can divine his intentions. He is deliberately using a word that he knows would be misunderstood in different ways, in different frames of reference. He's doing this deliberately. He's a silly person. He's doing it deliberately. All right. He knows what this person means when they say that word, and he knows what he means when he says the word, and he knows that they're different, and they have different implications. Get out of here, disciple, with your silliness. All right. But of course, you've heard me say spiritual nonsense too. I also think that it's stupid, but it means something very different from what this guy means by stupid. All right, we have to understand
the perceived
this.
ties to the ancient world, wild, unsubstantiated claims about reality, plus bonus cheese and chakras. Even for those who aren't looking for God, there is plenty to work with, since all humans have certain desires that are easy to tap into. We see this with virtually all of Chopra's book titles. The spontaneous fulfillment of desire, You Are the Universe, Boundless Energy, The Wisdom Within. It's marketing. People want their anxieties to congeal into serenity, which gives way to perfect control over their lives and minds. People want to feel relevant in the universe and connected to everything in it. Quantum mystics are attuned to the deep longings of their target demographic in order to most effectively exploit them, and to that end, they are selling one thing only: identity. You see, a brand of razor blade may be selling masculinity. A brand of fragrance may be selling elegance.
Wow.
A brand of soft drink might even sell the feeling of being extreme. But the quantum mystic, on the other hand, is selling artificial transcendence. It's the convenient sale of an enlightened self-image for the
Artificial
spiritual
transcendence?
warrior in a hurry.
I want my Zen now. I mean, I don't think he's not entirely wrong. Obviously, this is the case sometimes. Not for everybody though, but it is the case. Some people they want to pay for their enlightenment, and they want it now. What does artificial transcendence mean? Can you artificially transcend? What is that? What is he getting at here?
Given that we live in the intranet age,
hey.
this fad is not limited to a handful of authors and gurus. Many versions of this narrative can be found all over YouTube. There are hundreds of such channels, each with their own flavor, but the core message tends to be pretty much the same. So I'll just pick on one of the bigger ones,
Am I one of these channels?
which is called Spirit Science. Here we find mystical ramblings amidst a backdrop of delightful animations. Let's take a listen to one about crystals.
Okay.
Crystals, what are they? No, seriously, look at all these amazing structures and forms. They're beautiful, they're powerful, and they're life. Crystals are the essence of life manifesting within the earth, the blossoms of the mineralogical portion of the earth. Recognition of these energies and forms of crystals can greatly benefit your personal growth. It is a very basic consciousness, not as intricate or advanced as some life on Earth. Crystals definitely don't have the thinking capacity of humans, or even the biological reproductive systems of plants, but they are life.
No, crystals are not alive.
So again, yeah, he's obviously going to be doing the same thing, saying that when she says life, she must be using life in the biological sense, which she very clearly said they don't have the biological structures. So she understands that crystals are not biology, a very different thing. Toxic because I'm criticizing your cult leader, lol. My video is toxic when I criticize. I'm pretty sure this must have been a video of me criticizing Leo Gura, and people think that we're all in a cult, apparently. It's very strange to see the comments. You know, half of them think I'm in a cult for criticizing Leo. The other half of them think I'm in a cult for agreeing with Leo. The comments can't figure out what my actual position is. How strange. If only people actually listened, huh? How about that? If only anybody actually listened. Crystals are not alive. Sure, they're not alive by the biological sense, but she clearly doesn't mean biology. She literally said it, in fact. So if we were having ears to hear, we would understand that she doesn't mean that crystals have the 7 factors or whatever whatever new definition of life we have. Crystals obviously don't have DNA. They don't reproduce in any normal sense. They don't have homeostasis, blah, 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 blah. We can get into it, but we're not talking about biology here. She's talking about spiritual nonsense. Very different.
Alive. There are very specific criteria that qualify something as being alive, including metabolic activity, which means lots of chemistry happening inside all the time, response to stimuli, growth, and reproduction. Crystals are inert. They are not alive, period. The word life
Period.
has a rigorous definition, and
The word life has a rigorous definition in biology. I wonder when that word life was used. And I wonder when biology, the rigorous definition of biology, life, was created. And I wonder what normal people use when they say that word. They listen to not biology, it's just a sound. Oh, they're practicing, I see. They're practicing. Oh, very good. They're doing some good vipassana, letting the sounds come and go. No meaning. They are very well practiced practitioners here. Advanced folks, possibly.
it can't just be applied to any random object.
Crystals are defined as being a mineralogical body with a characteristic internal structure and enclosed by a symmetry of plane faces. They are, however, much more than that.
Okay.
No, they are not.
We've discussed
Let's hear
before
it.
that everything in the universe is a vibration, existing through many different frequencies at once. Our physical bodies are on this physical plane, but the sounds that we hear vibrate to a different frequency, as with smells and even thoughts. Crystals also vibrate to many frequencies at once.
We are discovering some more key buzzwords for the quantum mystic: vibration and frequency. These are used just like energy as being synonymous with magic. That atoms and molecules vibrate doesn't mean they can cast magic spells, and frequency
Did she say that they could cast magic spells? We don't want to straw man a little bit here, right? We just listen to what she said. She said that spells are vibrations, which is a very strange way of putting it. I actually don't understand exactly what she means there at all. But everything is energy, so everything is vibrating. It kind of makes sense, but also I don't know what frame of reference she's coming from, so I can't quite understand. But it didn't sound like she said that just because everything is energy or just because everything is vibrations that it can cast magical spells. I don't think she said that. So we don't want to overstep in our criticism of her.
is just a word that means number of cycles per unit time and has no significance when not applied to a concretely defined phenomenon. When the mystic says,
But hey, it may be, I don't know if it's concretely defined because we're just watching a random one video without getting the textbook and actually looking at the front and reading the definitions of all the words, right? I don't think we've given her that grace to do that. Unfortunately, we just seem to have read some random scientific definitions of these words and think that these are the gold standard, or these are the end of language. Science is the end of language, apparently. Science is where we figured it all out and everyone else must use the word in that way. We have to be strictly authoritarian about it, which is toxic, nonsensical. I've got stronger words to say that I feel, but I'm not going to say that.
higher frequencies, they mean good frequencies,
High
which
vibes.
doesn't mean anything, just like good energy doesn't mean anything. When the quantum mystic says that something is emitting frequencies,
It's so silly because it literally meant, he literally just gave us the meaning. It doesn't, higher vibration means good vibration. Good vibration means higher vibration, which doesn't mean anything. You literally just defined it. It's very clearly defined apparently in the way that these people are thinking about it, because he just said it. He knows exactly what they mean. So how is he saying it doesn't mean anything? It's so silly. So silly.
or vibrating to frequencies, they mean that it is magic, and they want to use a scientific vocabulary word to pretend that magic is real.
Health is the natural state of any form in the universe. Considering the vibrational existence of reality, health comes when the frequencies of anything are in balance and harmony with itself.
Health is not the natural state of things. Disease is natural. Death is natural. This is the setup for a snake oil pitch, and it's a classic one. Then again with the buzzwords. Frequencies of what? The word frequency doesn't mean anything if not directly referencing a physical phenomenon that can possess a frequency, like light or sound.
When patterns of energy are disrupted, we experience a state which we know as disease, which is a body that's not at ease.
So I'm noticing earlier you said that Deepak Chopra just kind of finger blast you with lots of buzzwords until you stop caring and just pay money, right? And that happened just like half a second ago, where he pausing the video so much to be super overly pedantic and sticking to a very strict scientific definition of all these words when this person, spirit science, is clearly, expressly not using the scientific definitions of these words, I just kind of glossed over. And I was like, oh, okay, I guess I don't need to address that one because he's doing that same thing again. I'm just gonna let it happen. And he's just finger blasting me with all these random definitions of scientific terms that don't mean anything because we're not talking science, right? This person's not doing pseudoscience. They're just talking about different ways of thinking. So I guess he's utilizing that technique that he thinks Deepak is using, and it may be super effective, I think.
This graph.
How does a crystal have frequency? You must know. Digital watches work on quartz vibrating. That's because of electric current going through. I have no idea anything about crystals. I mean, they have structures and they do vibrate, right? I think that's sort of the basis of it in terms. I have no idea. I don't know what it means to have frequencies. You'd love to know the frequency we need to go through to go through this. Spiritual definition, bad. Science definition, good. Yes. I think both definitions are different. Yes. Can we pump up the frequency of this so that we can get to top speed and get through it? Okay, well, we might just want to stop it. Okay, I don't know.
Is meaningless. We don't have orbs of colored light around us. Disease has a molecular basis. Mm-hmm. It does not have a basis in invisible personal rainbows that definitely do not exist.
Auras. I thought the idea of crystals is that they are like very solid. I mean, crystals are like structures that you can hold and stuff, and it's all in that sense. They are very pretty, but they have, structures and stuff, that they vibrate at. I don't know. I mean, everything vibrates, right? Everything moves and shakes and stuff. And they have resonant frequencies, I suppose. I have no idea. I don't know. I have no idea. I don't know what crystal stuff is.
The resistant discordant energy patterning is responsible for every negative symptom we experience. Everything from headache to cancer.
Again, what is this? Frequency of what? This has no correlation with anything in physical reality. Mm-hmm. Headaches and cancer are not caused by little quivering lines. This is such unadulterated fantasy that there isn't even anything to debunk.
So, again, he doesn't understand it, so he's saying that it's wrong just because he doesn't understand it. He hasn't taken the time to understand any of it, obviously. And it's clear that he's not actually listening to the person. We can tell that by his being pedantic about life when the person very clearly said that crystals are alive, but they're not biological. So this person already understands some things a little bit more flexible with language than our friend Dave is. And since we can tell that Dave is not listening to what anybody's saying, when he just points out that he doesn't understand something, he just says he doesn't understand something. That is not an argument against the thing. It just means you don't understand it personally. I don't understand it either. I don't know what this lady's talking about crystals and vibrations. That doesn't mean it's necessarily wrong, right? It's just a different model of understanding disease and health and other stuff. And they're using the word a little bit differently than typical. I'm doing to him what he is doing. In some sense, like I'm pausing. I guess I'm being pedantic because I'm stopping. Am I being pedantic? Or am I sort of dogmatically saying that everybody uses words differently, and he should too, or he's bad? Am I saying that? Maybe a similar technique because I'm pausing the video a lot and pointing out where he is maybe a little bit misguided. But yeah, maybe similar. I'm not sure.
In the physical world, you pick up a crystal and feel it as something separate from you that you're just holding. But on higher frequencies, you're actually interacting with that stone energetically. Mm-hmm. This interaction then causes changes to your structure and psychology through your own energetic systems.
Wow.
No, this does not happen. If it did, it could be measured and substantiated. It is a fabrication aimed at people who don't require evidence in order to believe something.
So he's doing a little slippity thing. But again, we're stuck in the scientific worldview without thinking about other people's worldviews. There is evidence. It's just different from scientific evidence, right? There are ways to show it and measure it. They just aren't scientific ways to show it and measure it, right? You just hold a crystal and figure it out, right? Go to other people who have crystals and you can do it and you can figure it out and you can feel the crystals. Presumably, I've never done crystal stuff, so whatever. The way that he's using these words are just being so dogmatic into his own particular personal way of viewing the world. He's not allowing for other people to use different definitions. Unless he likes those people, then they're using metaphors. Whatever. This is silliness. There's more
Now,
silliness.
consciousness is, of course, the determining factor of if you are going to be accepting of these new frequencies coming into your being through crystals. I'm not going to say crystals will heal you, because if you fight them and are non-receptive to these frequencies, you will continue to create the disharmony within yourself.
The translation here is that crystal healing works by placebo effect.
Okay.
So if you don't think they will work, they won't work. Because
Well, that's good.
they only work when you trick yourself into thinking that they work.
So this is dumb again, right? He's saying pretend that they work and they'll work, or if you trick yourself into thinking that they'll work. No, he just said they're placebo effect. I mean, placebo effect is a totally valid effect. It's a very effective effect, right? 30% effectiveness for most things, right? You want to get over to get beyond placebo effect, and I guess if you believe it more, then it's better, right? And if you do it more often and you like charge the energy of the crystals, it works even better, right? So to disregard the placebo effect as being effective is just dumb, because obviously the placebo effect is real. It's the placebo effect. It's got a name there. It's scientifically shown and proven and all the other things if we want to appeal strictly to science. And to utilize that would not be a wrong thing to do or a bad thing to do. It seems to be a very helpful thing for some people, in fact.
Remember the 5 Platonic solids? Science understands that all atomic patterns and molecular structures were based on these 5 forms.
Okay.
No, they aren't. That doesn't mean anything. Molecular geometries do not exclusively resemble Platonic solids.
Oh, okay.
One of the biggest things about crystals is that they
I
can
don't know anything
transmit
about either of
frequencies.
those things.
From a metaphysical perspective, we can transmit thoughts and emotions through crystals. But scientifically, does that make sense?
No, it doesn't make sense. It sounds like magic. Just saying, doesn't that make sense, is not an argument.
Oh, she said, doesn't that make sense? Is that what she said? Or is she asking the question? I don't know. Yeah, you can transmit thoughts into things. I don't know if she meant that you can transmit it to other people, or you can transmit it to yourself, or I don't know exactly what that means. But again, I like to give the example of you go into your bathroom, you have to pee, you go into your bathroom, you have to pee more. You've transmitted the thought of peeing into your bathroom. It seems pretty basic. We can all understand and feel that and experience that. You can transmit the thought of going to sleep in your bed. If you go into your bed and go to sleep. But unfortunately, most people haven't charged the energy of their bed with sleeping. They've charged the energy of their bed with TVs or Reddit or phone or whatever. And you can just very basically do that. If you're sleepy, you go to your bed and you want to get on your phone. Well, you've charged the energy of your bed with your phone. I mean, this is transmitting thoughts through objects. It's a pretty simple thing that you can do in some sense. I don't know if this is exactly what she means, but it seems pretty obviously easy to do, trivially easy to do also. And it does make a lot of sense, right? Am I wrong here? It makes a lot of sense.
Science found in the 50s that silicon shows the same principles of life as carbon. Exactly 1 octave down on the periodic table from carbon is silicon.
They are called periods, not
Octave.
octaves. The periodic table is not a piano.
Sponges deep in the ocean made from a
Not only pianos have octaves. Yeah, she's losing me here, right? She's appealing to science too much. She's losing me, all right? I'm changing sides, all right? I'm with Dave on this one now, okay? She's going too far. She's talking about science. She's out of her wheelhouse. She's doing something bad. I'm on David's side, all right? This lady doesn't know what the heck she's talking about. They're not octaves, all right? It's not music. They're periods. I guess octaves and periods would be similar enough, huh? Period. Periodic, frequency, octave, close enough. I'm coming to Dave's side on this one, I think.
100% silicon were also discovered, which shows that silicon life doesn't just work in theory, but they actually exist right here on this planet.
There are no sponges made of 100% silicon. If something is made of 100% silicon, it is silicon. This is one of the dumbest sentences I've ever heard. I can't understand how any human person doesn't just laugh out loud when they hear things like this. Okay, that's enough on crystals. Let's hear some commentary on physics.
But wait, what does she mean by that, though? So, like, what are the sponges made out of silicon, or silicon, sorry. Does anybody know what that means? Sponges made out of silicone. I don't know what the heck she meant. She maybe meant something. I'm just finding sponges. Silica sponges, major group of phylum perforium, silica dioxide. Yeah, it's a thing. It's a thing that she's talking about here. Silicus sponges, major group of the phylum that consisting of classes that, and they're characterized by speculas made out of silicon dioxide. There you go. They're made out of silicon dioxide. So silicon-based lifestyle. Silicon-based life. This is what she's referring to. I think that's, I mean, the way that she framed it, the way that she said it, as if it's 100% silicon. Obviously not the case, but made out of silicon-based life is silicon-based life, as opposed to carbon-based life. I don't think that this is a terribly bad thing to say, right? No? Maybe?
What physics is telling us is that everything comes down to geometry and the interactions between elementary particles. Things can happen only when things are perfectly balanced.
That's not what physics
This
is
doesn't
telling
mean
us.
anything. It's just more vague nonsense intended to get people nodding their heads, pretending they are learning about deep truths in physics.
Garrett demonstrates to us how the particles that create point particles really work. He shows that when you plot them out in how they move, this is what they look like. At the tiniest scales of the universe in how it works is very beautiful.
What is this? Subatomic particles are not colored squares and circles and triangles. What are we looking at?
Well, the squares and circles and triangles are just to distinguish which particles are which, though generally, if you're looking closely enough, particles wouldn't be point particles because we're being a little bit more quantum and weird and fuzzy at that point, but you know, whatever.
What do these symbols represent? Not even a half-assed attempt to explain anything is offered, just random images acting as a backdrop for word salad.
Now, look at this. This is one of the ways that these charges branch off from each other.
Okay.
As you can see, it flows in a hexagonal pattern, the same pattern that we found in the expanded flower of life. Then, if you rotate this pattern in 6-dimensional charge space, you see it forms yet another pattern. Many of you will recognize this as the shape of the Star of David, but its true name is the star tetrahedron, which maps perfectly over the fruit of life.
People love cool shapes, so the quantum mystic shows lots of cool shapes.
I do like cool
Again,
shapes.
meaningless.
But
This shape, as we learned, is
Very
not only the
confused.
root of all mathematical proportion, light, the Platonic solids, but is also the source of every musical system in the universe, including systems both used and unknown to modern man.
I'm sorry, how? This shape is the root of light? What does
yeah, I wish I understood what that meant. And also, she's stepping on music now. All right, she's gone way too far. All right, maybe we can allow a little bit of stepping into science and misusing those, but to jump into music, no, just wrong. Okay, just wrong. I'm fully on Professor Dave's side. I think he's got to convert to logic and physics. This lady doesn't know what she's talking about. All right, music is not founded on whatever the heck she's talking about. I don't know what it is. I don't need to know what it is. She's just wrong.
that mean? Where are the Platonic solids in here? How does this shape produce musical systems? Please explain.
Doesn't.
My favorite part is how it's
All musical systems known to man, she said. All musical systems. No, it can't. It's not. It can't be. We've got beautiful music out there that are just based on different things. We don't need the same type of harmony. We don't need like old classical music type harmony, which even that wouldn't be based on this stuff. There's so much more. There's so much more. We don't. I'm triggered. Maybe you can get some music out of that and say that that's based off of these sort of weird things that she's talking about. But then when we get to weird stuff, this is not based off of. This is not like. This music isn't like the frequencies that she's referring to. Not at all, right? This is something completely different, all right? This is not the foundation of all music. Music is not based on any foundation, okay? Get out of here.
the source of musical systems that are unknown. So we don't know them, but they're still based on this. That's about enough. But here's one more.
That is enough.
While today there are many sciences and researches delving into that ultimate question, what is a soul? There is still no concrete answers to this question.
Since
No,
when does
there
science
are no
try to-
scientists trying to explain what a soul is, because that is not a scientific concept. Science is the study of the physical world.
Whoa!
Anything
He finally got something.
supernatural, by definition, is not science.
Whoa! Why didn't we start here? Why didn't he start with this? Scientists do not try to explain the soul. This is so true, right? Because it's not a scientific concept. It's not related to science. That word doesn't mean anything in science. And you use other systems for evaluation to evaluate that concept, right? Oh, wow. He's onto something here.
And there is no evidence that anything supernatural exists.
There's no scientific evidence for the supernatural because science is very, very plainly restricted to the natural as they defined it, right? Whoa. You could have started there and use other systems for doing supernatural stuff. It is so true. This guy is so based. He understands.
This disconnect encapsulates the problem with quantum mystics. If someone wants to believe in a soul or speculate about the supernatural, they can go ahead and do so. But to pretend that it is supported by science is ludicrous.
It is not, maybe not ludicrous. Maybe it's ludicrous, I don't know. If somebody wants to believe in the soul, they're free to do so. If someone doesn't want to believe in the soul, they're free to do so. If somebody wants to evaluate the validity of other things that are non-physical, non-physics based, non-natural maybe, I don't know what language other people like to use. If you want to evaluate things that are not restricted to the claims of physics, you can do that too, right? This is my point. This is what I'm trying to say here. And it's okay for you to use whatever word you want to use. That's the next step too. You can say energy if you like to use energy. You can say frequency if you like to use frequency. It gets a little bit weirder when you literally start to pull up the periodic table and call them octaves and all that sort of stuff. That's when you know that you've jumped the gun and you're actually using scientific concepts. You're trying to appeal to science to validate your spiritual nonsense. That's just dumb. Don't do that. Okay, don't get caught in that silliness. That's dumb. All right, quantum mysticism is stupid in that respect. If we want to go back to the title of this, yes, I agree with that completely. Don't use science to validate your spiritual nonsense. But you can use whatever spiritual system you want, and you can use whatever labels you like to use with those spiritual systems for evaluating this sort of non-physical, non-physics-based phenomena. I think that's totally acceptable. I'm on board with that.
Videos like these are just rapid-fire lies over stock footage aimed at people who want to believe in magic, but also want to feign compatibility with real science. They are willfully ignorant to the point where they can't be bothered to even Google a word to find out if it's being used properly.
So they're not using it improperly. They're just using it in their own, idiosyncratic way. It's not even idiosyncratic. The spiritual sort of New Age types is kind of a common phenomenon, right? So they're using these words in different ways than how you're using. No need to scrutinize what we've chosen to believe without bias. People are scrutinizing it. They're just scrutinizing it in different ways. And if you scrutinize science, then wouldn't be believing too much of that either. Well, we don't want to get too much into that.
Story they've chosen to believe takes precedent over fact. And these are the types that will buy the 7-day transformation course and attend the retreats, and otherwise fork over the cash that makes these channels lucrative.
Hey.
Getting back to a more general discussion, as we can now see, from Deepak to YouTube, a central theme of quantum mysticism has been identified.
Physicists are being forced to admit that the universe is a mental construction, because new physics is finally discovering that the observer shapes the reality.
Oh no.
Quantum scientists are now conducting measurable experiments,
Oh no.
never before thought possible, to prove the theory. Consciousness creates reality.
Oh no. Okay, I'm going back on the science side now. All right. We're going back on the science side. We're back on Professor Dave's side. I really don't like, as you guys know, we talk about quantum mechanics a lot. I don't like appealing to quantum mechanics for spiritual nonsense. And this is not what quantum mechanics shows. All right, this is not it. This ain't it, Chief.
So that's the story. Consciousness creates reality. There is no such thing as a physical world. Consciousness is all that exists.
Okay.
Now, this little hypothesis...
But there's nothing wrong with that, right? To say that, because that's just what they're defining the word reality to mean. To say that consciousness is the foundation of reality is not so problematic. It just means that literally the words of reality are being used differently than scientists are using. Materialists are using it in one particular way, and these are consciousness first type people are using it in a different type of way. And that's acceptable, I think.
This is all well and good if uttered between stoned philosophy undergrads at a party. But no, the quantum...
Again, we're just making fun of people for being profound and deep in their own particular ways. We don't need to call them stoners, all right? That's just messed up, all right? Just messed up.
Mystic insists that this notion is physics, that this deep truth is derived directly from empirical science. Well,
That's
it
a problem.
absolutely isn't,
That's a
but
problem.
that then begs the question,
It isn't.
where did this lie come from? It's obvious that it's just a self-help sales pitch. It's quantum Tony Robbins.
Does conscious intention create reality? This question comes with a number of other questions. Does this mean we as individuals can shape and create whatever reality we'd like for ourselves?
Whoa.
Does it mean we can manifest a certain lifestyle and attract certain experiences?
Whoa.
Manifest your desires with only 4 easy payments of $19.99. So again, if the notion of consciousness...
Guys, you can all manifest your desires with a very easy, simple 4-step plan. A simple payment of $19.95. You gotta have these odd numbers apparently. Or you can do it for the simple price of $5 per month with your primers. No, it's free per month with your primers. Anybody with some primers out there? Prime subs? Anybody? 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 Sub to the channel if you want to support the stream, your favorite stream, your most chill stream, maybe not your favorite, but the chill stream, you know, the one that has the most wholesome content, though what we have right now is probably not very wholesome. Support your favorite streamers. Support.
Creating reality has nothing to do with quantum physics. How can these mystics claim as much?
Give me a big D
This is
one
very
day.
easy to answer. All of this woo stems from deliberate misinterpretations of key experiments in 20th century physics. The most notable such misinterpretation is related to the famous double slit experiment.
So I don't think this is deliberate. He's in this thing where he's talking about the, you know, intentions of people. It's not deliberate. It may not be deliberate. People just don't understand quantum mechanics, right? And they think that the observer sort of thing, they think that needing an observer means that you need a conscious observer, not that there just needs to be any interaction between particles. There's some things that are missing here, right? But I mean, if you scrutinize any of these things, they get a little weird and people don't quite understand them. And you can kind of shake the foundations of scientific belief if you believe the science, if you think that they're sort of real or pointing to reality in some sense, when they aren't. They're instrumental tools for helping understand the way that world works.
I have a tutorial on this topic as well as many other key aspects of quantum physics in my Modern Physics playlist, so please head over there after this video if you're interested in learning more about it. But to briefly summarize the issue that is relevant...
Would I prefer big donations or small donations? I have no preference. If you like to donate, please do. If you don't, that's no problem. We're just hanging out, man. It's no big deal. Whichever you find most comfortable with personally, or don't donate. As long as we're hanging out, we're chill. That's all we gotta do.
Relevant here, the double slit experiment was pivotal in demonstrating something called wave-particle duality. In short, everything is both particles and waves. Light is waves, but it's also particles, called photons. Electrons are particles, but they are also waves of probability density. When you get down to the tiniest things, everything is particles and waves. And it doesn't matter that it doesn't make sense to us. It doesn't matter that we can't visualize it or rationalize it. That's what the math tells us, so that's how reality works. The way the double...
Oh, so he's doing it too. Oh, we haven't exposed, but we see that he thinks that reality is this way, right? He's just wrong. He doesn't understand physics or science. He's a professor. I guess he does understand it, but he doesn't understand the context of physics and science and stuff. Money is fake. Might as well ask for 20 bucks. Give me 20 bucks. Guys, help support the stream. 20 bucks. This is ridiculous. This is not how reality works. This is an instrument for how we this is an instrument for reading reality. It's an instrument for understanding reality, not necessarily how reality actually is. Instrumentalism. Very basic. Hey, Original Mind isn't here. What's he up to? Very, very basic thing for understanding predictable phenomena, I suppose, but it's not actually understanding reality, right? We all know this. Maybe we all don't know this. Quantum mechanics is not more real than relativistic mechanics or any other model for seeing the world. These are pretty okay approximations for getting useful, helpful ways of manipulating some parts of reality in predictable manners. But it's not actually getting to reality. They're approximations. It's not true. It's not real. Quantum mechanics is not true. It's not real. Relativistic mechanics is not true. It's not real. These are just both our best approximations so far, and we know for sure that they're going to be overthrown by something else, and it's going to be a completely different system, and we're going to completely change the way that we understand what space is and time, or even stuff, things, waves, particles, all that stuff. It's just going to be completely redefined. Everything gets redefined when you get new scientific theories, right? Do you know this? Right? We have Newtonian mechanics where space and time are
God.
different things.
Evelyn's.
Whoa. Wow. Thank you, Heplin, for this beautiful. We've got a tip here. Wow. Much appreciated. 350 for the 350. 3 big ones. 3.5 big smackers. Much appreciated. Thank you very much for thank you very much for helping the stream. So this is what was I saying? Okay, you've got Newtonian mechanics where you have space and you have time, and these are different things. Space and time, they're different things, and they're solid things, or they're normal solid things, and in a deterministic worldview you can have all of space and time and whatever. But then we have relativistic mechanics where space time is one thing and it bends. It's a whole different thing. It's a whole different space. What we mean by space in Newtonian mechanics is completely different from what we mean by space in relativistic mechanics. And space doesn't even mean anything in relativistic mechanics because it's space-time. It's a whole other thing. Do you get the picture here? And then when we go into quantum mechanics, we have space-time again, but it doesn't move. It doesn't bend. There's no gravity there. It doesn't bend. This is a whole different thing. Space means something completely different, in which means that everything that derives, everything that is downstream of space means something completely different, right? So if anything is referencing location, it's something different, right? Does that make any sense? But then you have some other concepts which don't necessarily reference location, which are not necessarily different. But I guess if it references time, it's also different. So anything that references location, anything that references time are just completely different things. Speed in relativistic mechanics, speed in quantum mechanics, and speed in Newtonian mechanics are just different concepts. They mean totally, absolutely different things. Does that make any sense? You mean the things become less similar? Like if we're talking about location, if we talk about an object in a particular location, they mean something not quite the same. But then if we go like to other concepts, like speed or like velocity or acceleration, these are more similar to each other because they reference less things. You don't need a location to have a velocity. You don't need a particular location to have a. This is complicated stuff. Okay, it doesn't really matter. In any case, these things are incommensurate. They don't mean the same thing, and none of them are pointing towards reality. This is what we're trying to say. These are not pointing towards reality. We don't just say the math says it, therefore this is what reality is. No, this is what our model is. This is a good approximation, but it's not it. This ain't Chief. Ain't it?
Slit experiment works is that particles are allowed to diffract through 2 slits to generate an interference pattern on a detector beyond, as makes sense for a wave. We can do this
Original
with light,
mind.
but we can also do this with electrons.
He shows up with the name. What's up, Original Mind? How you doing, man? He shows up.
In fact, we can
Double
even
slit.
do it with an individual electron. The diffraction of an individual electron is a compelling demonstration of the wave nature of matter. Now here's the kicker.
Okay.
When we are not interfering with the process, the particle appears to pass through both slits, just like a wave. But when we try to determine which slit it passes through, it appears to only pass through one, like a particle. It's incredible. The act of observing the particle changed its behavior.
Observing.
The very act of measuring or observing which slit it went through meant it only went through one, not both. The electron decided to act differently.
Decided.
As though it was aware it was being watched.
Observations influence external reality.
Wow. The electrons are paranoid?
At least that's the
what's happening?
pseudoscientific narrative that charlatans spin.
Oh, no.
In fact, it is impossible to observe a tiny particle, like an electron, without affecting the system. Observation requires physically interacting with such a particle. In the submicroscopic realm, observation is not a passive process. We can't spy on an electron the way we can peek at our neighbor through the window.
Well, I mean, even that, I mean, he's not being overly pedantic here, but in the nature of what he's been doing the whole video, we can all say this, right? When you can notice that when you see something and you get particles that are bouncing off of it, in this model, we've got photons bouncing off of it and hitting your eye. That's not passive either. So we can, if we want to go overly technical in the way that he's been doing so far, When you're in that model of reality, seeing reality as particles and stuff, even looking at somebody through your window, through the blinds, is not a passive activity. They're just spewing out photons everywhere, and you're seeing those.
Animating a little
Physically.
eyeball simply watching the electron is misleading and inaccurate. Measuring something about an electron involves interacting with it.
Any physical interaction will do. Any physical interaction.
Detection requires the emission of photons that interact with the electron and thereby affect certain properties of the electron.
Okay.
It is the physical act of taking a measurement that affects the system, not our consciousness. There is no magic. There is no voodoo, and there is no basis with which to conclude that particles know they are being watched.
Voodoo?
Or that we can create alternate realities with our minds. Something similar can be said for the quantum mystics' interpretation of the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, the concept of superposition, and any other aspect of legitimate physics they attempt to reference, which means absolutely nothing if you don't do any math. There is nothing in physics that lends any credibility to the notion that the universe is immaterial, or some kind of mental construct. One can engage in such philosophical speculation if they choose, and it's not a totally meritless intellectual exercise. But to say that such ideas have some kind of empirical basis in physics is objectively false. Anyone who says anything of the sort either doesn't understand physics, or is lying, or both. Then, of course, there is the word quantum itself. It is a far more boring word than many people presume. Quantum simply refers to the minimum amount of any physical entity involved in an interaction.
Quantized.
So, for example, photons are quanta. A photon is the smallest amount of light there can be. This idea of quantization tells us that physical properties consist strictly of integer multiples of some tiniest indivisible subunit. So there is a tiniest quantity possible for energy, space, and time, and all values are multiples of that unbelievably tiny subunit. Quantization is a core principle of quantum mechanics, and that's what this word refers to.
Yep.
It does not refer to lasers or interdimensional travel or whatever other unadulterated fantasy the mystic seeks to infuse it with.
Okay.
So apart from the self-help snake oil courtesy of Deepak and pals, where else does this narrative rear its ugly head?
Where do we see
Who
it?
else lines their pockets with this brand of pseudoscience? Let's head over to the medical realm.
So I guess we don't have to keep saying it over and over again, but, divining their intentions of lining their pockets, or as if making money is a bad thing. Either making money is a bad thing, it seems like that may be what we're getting at, making money is a bad thing, or maybe that we assume that they're doing it to make money. Either way, if we're defining their intentions, it's probably not a good idea. It's completely unnecessary for the argument that he's trying to make, I think. So we don't need to appeal to it. We should stop doing that. Ever since I started making this dissecting, debunking science versus spirituality a major part of the stream, you've been seeing me tired more frequently. You can almost see my health dissipate as I watch it. I mean, you're not wrong, right? Watching this sort of scientific debunking folks, I mean, they're very de-energizing, of course. They're very, very de-energizing. But I don't know if it's such a direct one-to-one correlation. Maybe the reason why I want to watch these videos is because of my health dissipating or degenerating or whatever.
Facet of quantum mysticism involves a total distrust of Western medicine. According to the mystic, the body can heal itself, so real medicine is just big pharma trying to make a buck. This is another example of how the alt-health industry fosters and exploits anti-establishment bias. There are some people who so desperately want to believe that every perceived authority is wrong that they will blindly trust anyone who tells them so. And in this realm, it means avoiding drugs and doctors in favor of magic crystals and healers. As the narrative goes, Western medicine treats the symptoms, while alternative medicine treats the cause. In fact, this is the precise opposite of the truth.
I don't know if it's precisely the opposite of the truth. We'd like to talk about this a lot, how people rag on modern medicine by, complaining about getting pills and stuff. And it's not wrong that people get pills. The problem is that people aren't actually taking the advice of the doctors. The doctors will tell you to exercise. The doctors will tell you to eat well. The doctors will tell you to have lower stress. The doctors will tell you to sleep well. They tell you all this stuff, right? And no one's paying attention. No one's listening. So the only resort that the doctor can do is to give pills. It's literally the only treatment that is effective. because nobody else is actually having healthy behaviors. So the doctors are kind of forced into just giving people pills. Now, there's nothing wrong with giving people pills, but we can't just criticize the doctors for only giving pills when literally the doctors also give you health advice. They also give you advice. They tell you to stop smoking. They tell you to stop eating like crap. They tell you to stop eating like crap. They tell you to stop having high stress. They tell you all this stuff already. So just because we conveniently don't follow the actual advice that they give us doesn't mean that we should be mad at them for giving us pills, because it's the only thing that people are actually only behavior they're actually willing to change, just adding pills to their diet.
As these phony treatments operate exclusively by placebo effect, which
It's
is
effective.
the slight mitigation of physical symptoms brought on purely by expectation. Essentially, if you believe your pain should be alleviated by pretty rocks or someone floating their hands over your body, then a shallow, fleeting period of pain relief can be experienced. But it is not causally related to the item or practice in question. It can be achieved by waving a magic wand and shouting abracadabra.
That seems causal to me. Why is he saying it's not causal? Well, he's actually giving us a cause. Yeah, so these spiritual traditions, or even vaguely spiritual folks, they're not always exclusively doing only magic, right? The big point is that they also can change your behavior, which is very good. So they have this sort of abracadabra moment in the little juice of placebo, but then they also actually are having effective ways of changing people's behaviors and making them eat well or whatever, and sleep and stuff. Which is more effective, and that's very helpful. So there's a bit more to it, and that's pretty good. But of course, the placebo is just placebo. Nothing wrong with that.
If the subject is prone to believing that should work. So all the power of the mind rhetoric is not entirely without basis, but this palliative effect, apart from disappearing rapidly, does nothing whatsoever to address the cause of the ailment. All disease has a molecular basis, and real medicine addresses that molecular basis with molecules, like drugs. These are compounds that...
This is wrong, right? He's just arbitrarily saying that the basis of diseases are molecular, but you can arbitrarily just go farther and say that it's based on your behavior, which I'm sure a lot of health clinicians would appreciate, to say that behavior is kind of the basis. But you can arbitrarily stop at behavior, you can arbitrarily stop at molecules, whatever. You can address whichever one. But if you just address the molecules, you're probably going to have the same behavior and have the same molecular problem arise again, which would suggest that it's actually more of a behavioral thing than a molecular thing. So I don't know if modern medicine, in that sense, will be addressing the issue at its root by just addressing molecules, right?
Interact with proteins in your body, like enzymes and receptors, so as to induce a physiological change in your body, which reverses or otherwise addresses some unintended biological activity. We don't really have time to talk in depth about how medicine works, as that's not the point of this video, but I have a pharmacology playlist if you're interested, as well as others on biochemistry and biology for the relevant background information. Otherwise, rest assured, alternative medicine treats the symptoms, and poorly at that. Western medicine treats the cause. Anyone who says otherwise is a duper or one who has been duped. So what are these treatments precisely? Well, as we said, lots of people believe that crystals have magical healing powers. Pushers of this narrative display such disregard for physical reality that beyond not feeling obligated to substantiate these claims in the slightest, they even tend to throw out vaguely scientific-sounding word salads as justification, knowing that their target demographic will not scrutinize them for a single second.
You're saying, I thought that the intention was to prove that mystical ideas with quantum mechanics, but the intention was to pull the notion of scientific theory as real. Yeah, I've very strongly always, from the very beginning here, been saying that any scientific theory is not reality, right? Unless you're defining scientific theory as reality, right? But then you can always update reality. As we will be doing. I'm not sure what you're referring to here, I guess. Clinging to science is in opposition to spirituality is ignorance. Oh yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. I don't think that science is in opposition to spirituality at all. I guess you missed the beginning of this video, or maybe every other stream that I've ever had where we talk about this sort of stuff. We don't have these things in conflict with each other. They're just referring to different things. Science is very good and very precise in their own worldview and their own narrow thing, and it's very effective, and it's cool, and we can be instrumentalists about science. We don't want to be stuck thinking that's reality, because it's not.
Their customers want to believe that magic is real and are willing to pay money to a practitioner to perpetuate this delusion. This could take the form of placing stones on the body, or the not as ancient as advertised practice of Reiki, which is just waving one's hands over the body to channel healing energy from a universal source. It's essentially faith healing, but with Asian mysticism instead of the Christian God. Each charlatan has their own jargon and specialized accoutrement, but at their core, they're all the same. They use words like quantum, vibration, frequency, and energy, all incorrectly, with the goal of propping up pseudoscience so blatant that it's legitimately offensive. All the while, the story is spun of how arrogant...
He was getting excited there. Again, he's saying again, that they're using the words incorrectly. They're not using the words incorrectly. People are using the words differently, and they seem to be defining them very clearly as they're using the words, as in the clips that he's been showing. So these folks aren't using scientific words incorrectly. They're using words that are not scientific. They just happen to have similar types of labels, or similar sounding labels, I suppose. Hey, what's up? Enjoy the food. What food is it? It is rice. Fried rice. Yum. You see it? It looks like rice. It's got a little egg in it. It's got a little onion in it. You know, fried rice. Yum. Scientists and doctors are so arrogant that they ignore the powers of the universe. You're not wrong. Spiritual person ain't wrong with that.
Scientists and doctors must be to ignore these powerful healing techniques, thinking themselves bigger than the universe. The hilarity behind this accusation lies in the fact that it is the healer who is so arrogant that they literally believe they have magic powers, like a wizard. That they are so wise, so enlightened, that they have access to a tier of reality that eludes the rest of the species. What could be a more narcissistic and childish delusion than this? Now, to be fair, we would do well to temper the outrage. Let's say someone goes to a Reiki session with a little back pain. They find the practitioner to be warm and personable. They have a little chit-chat. They lie down in a room with calming colored lights and pleasant ambiance. There's some Enya playing, or whatever those types of people are listening to these days. It all adds up to a legitimately therapeutic experience, leading to a placebo effect that makes them feel a little better.
Okay, that's very good. I don't like that he made fun of Enya there. Who doesn't like Enya? I mean, only time maybe. Enya's a lovely singer, so that seemed a little messed up here. Is it possible that someone might not go to a doctor because it's helpful, because they're hopeful their crystals will help them and miss a diagnosis that could save their life? Yeah, so if somebody's doing that, that's bad, right? You don't want to have them ignoring any effective treatment that can be used for the chance of some other treatment to be effective when it may not be effective, right? So that would be an issue if someone's foregoing any sort of diagnosis or treatment by using crystals, right? But that's not effective.
So where's the harm? Well, in such a case, one could say that there is no tremendous harm, and if you are looking to pay the price of a massage but not get one, then that's really up to you. And in fairness, most practitioners of these treatments are somewhat honest about their limitations, stating that they are not legitimate solutions for serious medical conditions or life-threatening emergencies. But not everyone in this culture displays this absolutely minimal modicum of ethical behavior. Some people get swept up in the notion that this sort of paradigm is the only true medicine, and that doctors and hospitals are not to be trusted under any circumstance. It goes without saying that this is a dangerous way of thinking, and when people forego actual medical treatment in favor of New Age voodoo, if this is prompted or encouraged by some perceived authority, it is a criminal act.
That's really bad. Why is he saying voodoo, though? I don't know why he keeps saying that. Voodoo is a particular religion that probably most people don't believe it, right?
People who prevent those in need of medical attention from getting that help should be formally prosecuted, especially in the case of parents acting on behalf of their sick children. Beyond these extreme circumstances, it is an enormous problem that the alt-health industry is not regulated whatsoever. What this means is that when a healer makes some dubious claim in their shop or on a website, it is not scrutinized, nor are they made accountable for its veracity in any way. There is no entity in place to monitor any of this activity because it does not fall under the domain of any kind of actual science or medicine such that existing regulatory bodies would have jurisdiction. Imagine what would happen if a pharmaceutical company advertised that their new drug was a treatment for some kind of heart disease, when in fact it's just a sugar cube. In what world would that be allowed to happen? Within legitimate industries, these kinds of bald-faced lies are impossible, but in the alt-health realm, it's the norm.
Hey, thanks for calling.
Homeopathic healers sell treatments that are truly nothing, just
Truly nothing. No, it's just water. Watered down, or no, it's just water, right? Watered down water, watered down medicine, watered down poison to be medicine. But of course, we do want to respect homeopathy for creating, understanding, developing our understanding of the threshold dosage theory. Understanding that you need a particular threshold, you need a particular dosage to go past the threshold in order for something to be actually harmful to you. Some people didn't recognize this at one point in time. You didn't realize that you can have low levels of certain things and it would still be, you can have low levels of certain poisons or bad things and they'll be very healthy. To give it like a silly example, you can have low dosage of sunlight exposure and that'd be very healthy for you, but then you can have a overexposure to sunlight and that'd be very bad for you. In very old theories of medicine, just because overexposure to sunlight was bad, we thought that sunlight was bad. Of course, not actually with sunlight, but any other medicine. Homeopathy had this idea of, the dosage being important, and we figured that out. We grew from that. But then, obviously, homeopathy got a little bit weirder and started getting lower and lower dosages, and now we have like infinitely precise, close to zero dosage of something, very, very, very diluted. And that would be helpful in some way. That's not exactly true for most things. Homeopathy is just like water, right?
Little globules that may as well be sugar cubes. If the consumer doesn't have the sense to see through the lies, that's on them. Regulation of any kind would mean the death of alt-health, as virtually nothing in it can be substantiated in any manner so as to be considered legitimate. So as we can now...
Legitimate in terms of science, of course, you can have other systems of legitimizing things, which apparently other people do, and they don't need to be substantiated by science or the medical field, and that's fine. But you also don't want to have people spending their money and losing their life to homeopathy. So there is a balance there to be had, but you don't want to have everyone be forced into using your particular value system, because it's not the only value system that is available for everyone to use. There are other value systems.
Now hopefully see the narrative of the quantum mystic is preposterous. The notion that all of these healing techniques and ancient practices constitute some kind of ultimate truth, and that big medicine wants to hide these truths away to pump you full of nasty chemicals to make money, is childish and in itself money-driven. Humans had an average lifespan of 30 all the way until the turn of the 20th century. Our current lifespan and quality of life is owed almost exclusively to scientific advancements enabling the treatment and in some cases total eradication of infectious diseases and other maladies.
So I don't know a lot about science history, but I don't think that this is actually entirely correct. It is correct in terms of like the data is just here, but it's mostly due to, not mostly, but heavily due to advancement in maternity things. What do you call this? Birth, maternity, natal, what do you call this? Fetal death rate falling. Fetal death rate falling. That's really the problem. So the average age being whatever, 30, it's because a lot of people died at birth. It kind of makes the numbers really strange. But then we got a little bit better at figuring out how to make sure that mothers and babies stay alive when they're born in the 1900s. And that is kind of why the life expectancy grew. But that might not be, I mean, that's not entirely tied to other medicines, right? It is just, you can really put it down to just that one thing, and get a very, very similar type graph. But the general life expectancy for somebody who was like above 5 is probably about similar to what most people's life expectancy are today, if we look at the past too.
Until the turn of the 20th century.
A slight bit of nuance.
Our current lifespan and quality of life is owed almost exclusively to scientific advancements enabling the treatment and in some cases total eradication of infectious diseases and other maladies. Science is the real deal, and Western medicine is science-based medicine. The mystics are the ones slinging snake oil for cash, as this crystal, frivolously labeled Magic Wand of Universal Power, on sale for only $150, is, I'm sorry to say, just a pretty rock.
This is all fakery, yeah. I don't know if he's just pointing out a random crystal and saying that must mean that all people who engage in crystal stuff is bad, which is kind of a strange way of putting it. Just because one person's misusing it, maybe a lot of people are, I don't know. And it's just kind of weird to just put a random thing here. It doesn't really help support his point, other than for people who already agree with his point completely. Again, I'm not a person who even likes crystals. So I don't know anything about crystals. But to point out one person selling a crystal for a lot of money does not necessarily mean that every person who uses crystals is doing it for some sort of monetary incentive, nor is it saying that every person who, that it's a bad thing or wrong or not useful or helpful or whatever.
This is where
doesn't help support his point.
One must distinguish between your everyday self-help grifter and the much more damaging narrative of the quantum mystic. The former may be vague and hollow, but ultimately in some cases does actually help people. The path to happiness is inward and subjective, so if someone attains happiness and personal growth through some cookie-cutter self-help seminar, there's no real basis for anyone to tell them that they didn't. The quantum mystic, however, makes concrete, highly specific claims about the nature of external reality that are objectively false. These false claims lead people away from medical treatment and sow the seeds of distrust in the scientific community, which inevitably rears its ugly head in the form of the anti-vaccine movement and other cultural defects that end up killing people. In short, this is not a phenomenon that should be ignored. It should be exposed and deflated to prevent further damage. If you doubt how far this can go, you underestimate the degree of deception some people are willing to commit, as well as the capacity of the average person to fall for it. I'm talking about cults. Quantum mysticism is fertile territory for wannabe cult leaders. Take, for example, a YouTube channel called actualized.org, which has a little over 1 million subscribers. At first glance, this self-proclaimed prophet, a guy named Leo Gura, offers the same transparent self-help mumbo-jumbo as 1,000 salesmen before him. But as he evolved, his tactics went beyond this. Allow me to briefly demonstrate that Leo is a cult leader.
Let's hear it.
I'm not being facetious here. When I say that someone is a cult leader, I mean that literally.
I'm very excited
But every
for this.
cult has a story, so let's see how this one started. Again, like many cults, Leo started out in the self-help realm. How to be attractive, how to get money, how to get girls, how to make said girls squirt once you get them. Obviously some very highbrow stuff. But before long, he took a
Very, very useful techniques. They're very helpful, right? You gotta know how to do these things, right? All right, it's very important for the pickup artists out there in the
dive
world.
into the pool of mysticism. Here's him warming up with some of the compulsory jargon.
My thesis is that quantum mechanics corroborates non-duality. Quantum mechanics conclusively debunks materialism and the notion of there being an objective reality or physicality. The only way to really understand the full consequences of quantum mechanics is to transcend the human mind. It's not merely that we don't know where the particle is because our instruments aren't accurate enough. It was literally discovered that there is no such thing as a particle. It was also discovered that observation affects all measurements, such that you can't actually take a measurement of anything without affecting the thing that you're measuring. When you're not looking at your child, that child exists as infinity, as nothingness. When you're not looking at an elephant, it's infinity, it's nothingness. When you're not looking at your house, it's infinity, it's nothingness.
Ta-da.
That's what it is.
So,
Okay, that was silly. So he does the thing that we don't like to hear people do. We've talked about it many times, where Leo talks about quantum mechanics debunking relativistic mechanics. I'm not sure if it necessarily debunks it, but it may be helpful in showing that relativistic mechanics is not true. But it does not mean, this is the issue, it does not mean that quantum mechanics is true. Right? This is kind of a big problem. A lot of people like to do this. They point to quantum mechanics and say, this must be real and it must be true. All the implications must be true in all layers of understanding of the world. So we understand some weird things in quantum mechanics, no particular location, action at a distance, all this kind of, basic stuff. And then we look at the relativistic scale of the world and we say all of those implications must apply here. It is not the case. It is not it. Quantum mechanics, good approximation at its scale. Relativistic mechanics, very good approximation at its scale. We are looking for a theory of everything in physics, which will describe both of these scales and potentially more. That will be something that is, maybe you can consider it to be more true. It'd be more accurate, I guess. It'd make more accurate predictions, more precise predictions. But even that probably won't be true, right? That's just going to be another better approximation of the world. None of these things are true, and these things do not invade each other. We don't want to bring our determinism from the relativistic scale and bring it to the quantum scale. It doesn't work. Quantum mechanics is not deterministic. But you don't want to bring your probability and your wave functions and bring that into the relativistic scale, because that's not how it works. They don't even invade each other. They are separate things, separate things. So we do want to be aware of that. So I think he's a little bit wrong.
like many others, quantum mechanics is the well he draws his lies from. What's the central theme?
There is no physical reality.
So again, he's saying lies when he's not lying, right? Well, I mean, we don't need to understand we don't need to go into his motivations. Leo believes this stuff. I think that Leo believes this stuff. Maybe he does, I don't know. We don't need to figure out what his belief structure is. It's not a lie. He's just telling these things. Maybe he's wrong about it. Maybe he's right about it. Whatever. We don't need to appeal to his intentions in order to bring the point that we're talking about. It's completely unnecessary.
And no physical universe. The Big Bang never happened. You are not actually sitting on the planet Earth. Mm-hmm. Billion years have never passed. There is no space. There is no time. You are not a biological living creature. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. In fact, you were never even born. You do not have parents. You did not have a childhood. You did not grow up. You did not press play at the beginning of this video. You imagined all of that.
So we've heard...
So spot the difference. In the earlier video, he's using quantum mechanics to try to justify his spiritual nonsense. In this video, he's just presenting his spiritual nonsense. They are very, very, very different. He's presenting us a different worldview here, where the only thing that exists is now. Well, we're going to approximate a bit what his worldview is that he was presenting in that video, where the only thing that exists is now, and what you are thinking, I was about to point to my head, but it's not what you're thinking here, but what you are thinking, your imagination, it is all of reality. Past, future are all in your thoughts currently. Right? This is just a different worldview. He's not trying to present it and justify it with science. So there's nothing wrong with the way that he presented that. Leo is completely right in that sense. He's developing his own particular worldview, or talking about some other spiritual worldviews that other people have talked about, whatever. This is a different way of seeing the world, and it does not contradict science. It does not interact with the models about seeing science at all. There's nothing against science. It should not contradict science. If you're a scientist and seeing that, it doesn't matter. He's not saying anything scientific. He's saying that reality is your experience currently right now, and everything that you think is just the thought. And the past and the future are just imaginary. This is a fine way of viewing the world. It's just a different way of viewing the world. And there's nothing to criticize there. He just said different things. He has a different foundation for his understanding of the world. The only issue would be if you were to bring up science to try to justify that, because that would be dumb. You don't do that. You don't do quantum mechanics to justify that nonsense. That's something very different. So I'm on board with Leo on that one.
Heard this script before. Physical reality isn't real. It's all consciousness. Given his confidence on the subject, he must have some training in physics, I bet.
QM is not science? No, quantum mechanics is science. What I'm saying is you don't want to appeal to science. So if he's talking about a different understanding of the world, saying that everything is in your mind currently, right now, and you don't have a brain, you were never born, the only thing that exists is what you are now, and everything else is just a thought, that is just a whole different system. And if he were to start appealing to quantum mechanics, that would be bad. No, so the person who's making this video sliced up Dave, Professor Dave sliced up 2 different videos. So if you can notice, it may be hard to notice here. I'm gonna go back a couple. So this is an early video of Leo, like many, many years ago. And he's talking about quantum mechanics and he's just wrong. Leo doesn't understand quantum mechanics and he thinks it's debunking stuff that he doesn't quite get. He's just wrong here. But then we have this video where he's wearing white, which is a more recent video, and he's not appealing to science at all. He's not appealing to quantum mechanics. He's not appealing to anything like that. He's just presenting his worldview, which is completely different. And then now we're going back to an older video, apparently. Let's see what he presents in this older video.
My deepest qualification is not a certificate or a PhD. It's simply that I've thought about this stuff. I've been passionate about it and I've cared about it. And that's really the only qualification you need to understand a thing.
No, thinking about something really hard doesn't magically deliver comprehension. It just...
Well, it depends on what you're talking about, right? So to be passionate about something and to, have these deep insights or whatever into reality, the nature of reality, which is very well defined, precisely defined in the worldview that he's presenting here, the nature of reality, which is his perceptions, or your perceptions, or God's perceptions, whatever. The perception that you have access to, the nature of your reality, you can just sit down and think about it, right? You can sit down and meditate on that. You don't need very much in order to get that. There's no qualifications necessary. The qualifications is being alive, I guess, right? That's it. So I think I'm on board with Leo on this one too. Appealing to quantum mechanics is falling into Machio. Yeah, essentially that's what I'm saying, though I don't usually use that words. Appealing to quantum mechanics indiscriminately is confirmation bias. Possibly, yeah. A lot of people don't understand this when they're talking about a particular framework. It kind of justifies itself when you're in that framework. And if you're using anything outside of the framework, anything outside of the framework is obviously going to have different values. So, yeah, it's kind of an issue. Yeah, it's hard to catch, but when you know, I guess. You can sit down and meditate to experience your own experiences, right? And I don't know what the context of the video was, but Leo is saying that he has qualifications by being passionate and paying attention. He didn't say that word, but by being passionate. Machio, I think of it as delusion. I'm not sure. Tricks of the mind. What does Machio mean? Zen term refers to the devil's cave. Self-delusion. There you go. Conceptual nest of self-delusion. Yeah, so there are some things that you can actually be qualified to understand by just sitting down and paying attention. It's not really
leads people to a false sense of wisdom.
How can people with different frameworks better understand each other? So step 1 is to recognize that you have different frameworks. Step 2 is to not do what this guy's doing in this video. So in this video, he's assuming that his framework is the only valid framework, right? And the way that he is expressing that is by saying that everybody who uses particular words must be using those words in a scientific way, or they're doing pseudoscience. He also said the same thing about people who are saying spiritual words. They must be trying to do religion, but it's watered down religion. He just doesn't understand there's completely different worldviews. So he has to be a little bit less dogmatically attached to the way that he uses his words, his language, and his own particular worldview, and actually understand what other people mean when they use different language. And then that's kind of like the first step. You have to just be okay with dropping your own particular framework of viewing the world in order to understand other people's frameworks. And then, it's hard to you have to use a different system to figure out which one's better. It may not be necessary to figure out which one's better. It may be best to be fluid between them. I like the idea of being fluid between them. But, step 1 is you need to understand what people mean, and then you can evaluate which one's best.
Which is fertile grounds for cult building. Let's see how Leo does it.
You see, this is very radical.
Radical.
You do not want to accept what I'm saying here. And you have a million excuses for why what I'm saying doesn't make sense, and why it is false, and why I'm crazy. But what I'm telling you is the absolute truth. And deep down, you know this.
Wow.
This is what cult leaders do, insist that they're right, and any doubt or sentiment to the contrary is absurd.
I wonder if he watches his own videos. I wonder. Interesting. Yeah, it's the issue is, again, we're not getting a lot of context, so we don't understand exactly. Is there no fallacy for this? I don't know, there might be a fallacy, I'm not sure. If only we had a little bit more context to understand what Leo was talking about when he said absolute truth. Leo talks about absolute truths a lot, and he means different things when he says absolute truth. It gets a little tricky, okay? But he may just be referring to the nature of experience, his experience in particular, and potentially your experience. And, you know, there's nothing wrong with that, I don't think. We need a little bit more context to truly understand what he was saying, but this is true to step on people's understanding of the world, and call them foolish and just label people as bad for no reason at all is not a very healthy method of engaging in the world, right? It's not a very healthy way of engaging in the world. It's not a good way to understand other people. It's not good. Don't do that. So I do get a little annoyed when Leo talks about the absolute truth with a capital A and a capital T, kind of the language he likes to use. Sometimes it sounds like he's stepping on what normal people mean by truth. In that case, that would be bad. Other times it sounds like he's just presenting what he believes as, not believe, but he's presenting a different way of viewing the world, and he's just calling it absolute truth, and that's totally fine. So as long as you're not stepping on what other people mean by truth, right? As long as your truth does not contradict what scientific truth is, then you're okay. And if your truth doesn't contradict what any other people's truth is, that's totally fine. And one may be more foundational in different worldviews. If your foundation is perception or experience, consciousness or whatever, then yeah, the absolute truth in there is going to be different for the absolute truth in terms of physics or any other system of evaluation of the world. As long as we don't have any of these things step on each other, we're okay. We're A-okay. Without enough context, it's hard to tell if Leo was doing that in that particular case, but he does do it sometimes. So yeah, he does do it sometimes. But again, he doesn't say don't listen to yourself, listen to me. Ooh, a little bit of a conflation here. When he says he's presenting the absolute truth, he also says very clearly, he says it in every single one of his videos, this is not a belief system, this is not an ideology. He says, I can't remember the whole thing he says. He said a couple of things like that. You're supposed to see for yourself, right? The whole channel is supposed to be inspiration for you to go meditate or maybe take 5-MeO-DMT. The intent is for you to investigate for yourself, not to believe the words that Leo is saying. So we're kind of jumping the gun a little bit here, but there are criticisms to be had there, I think.
That voice of sanity telling you that this is bullshit, don't listen to it. Listen to me. Listen only to me.
And you start to feel yourself unravel. And of course, all of your emotions kick in to overdrive to warn you. Red warning alarms are sounding in your mind, telling you, do not listen to this.
Thanks for hanging out, Russell.
Anymore. Turn it off. Turn away.
I really appreciate you hanging out, man. Thanks for hanging out. I'll be back on Friday. Come back Friday. We're here Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 9 Eastern. Have a good one, man. Enjoy your Thursday.
Something else.
Take good care of yourself. It's very important.
Else, distract yourself. Forget about it. But that fear is precisely the thing that tells you that what I'm saying is true.
This is called gaslighting.
That was not gaslighting, and this is what sociopaths do. Oh my goodness. Okay, we're just gonna throw out. We're gonna pathologize again. More pathologizing. Okay, so what Leo was saying there, I'm fairly sure he's talking about this is like an experience that you can have where you kind of dissolve your identity, right? And it feels a little weird, and you kind of find excuses to not do it, right? I think this is exactly what he's describing, and I don't know if this is gaslighting. I don't think this is gaslighting. It's not. Maybe he is gaslighting. I don't know. We'll find out. spiritual people can gaslight sometimes, so they just deliberately misuse words, and they understand that other people are using the words in different ways, and they try to make it seem like you're crazy or that you don't understand the world, and that would be gaslighting or crazy making. I kind of use those words a little bit interchangeably too much. To say this is what sociopaths do, I don't know. I don't know about this. I don't know who has antisocial personality disorder. I don't think we need to pathologize people. It's like a forced cognitive dissonance. Yeah, it's like telling people that, let's look up the actual definition, making people feel like they're crazy, right? Haven't seen the movie before. Lighting. Gaslighting is a form of psychological manipulation when a group sows the seeds of doubt and targeting an individual, questioning their memory, perception, and judgment. So making somebody question their own judgment. Yeah. So it's a bit of a crazy making sort of thing on purpose, doubting their own worldview. I guess that would be gaslighting. But it depends on what he's saying. So I'm not entirely sure what the context of that video was. So it's a little bit misleading to just take that out of context to make it sound like gaslighting, but he may have been just saying something that was actually true, not gaslighting, right? So I don't know about that one. But it is true that a lot of people in the sort of spiritual scene do this sort of gaslighting type thing where they understand the way that normal people are using words, and they are deliberately using the word differently, and then they're calling people delusional, or they're calling people dumb, or they're calling people ignorant, or, pick your best insult, and they're saying this about people who use the word in the most typical ways. That is a little messed up, and that would be gaslighting, right? So don't do that. But I don't think Leo's doing that in this case, but it's possible. Who knows?
Means to manipulate someone psychologically to get them to question their own sanity. It's what sociopaths do, and all cult leaders are sociopaths.
Angry.
I don't understand why he even needed to. Why is he doing this? So the pathologization, I don't know, can I say this word? Pathologization? To pathologize people is already a little messed up. You don't necessarily need to do that. And then to overgeneralize cult leaders just seems completely unnecessary too. It doesn't really help the point. At least it doesn't seem to help the point for me. It may be good rhetorically to just, for all the people who already agree that spiritual folks are weird, it would be a help to, it would be rhetorically effective, but it's really not helpful for driving the point home to just call all cult leaders sociopaths. That's like, we need to define what sociopath mean. I don't know if he means it in a very clinical, like the actual clinical sense. I would assume so, since he's being very overly technical with every other term that's being used here. But then how do you figure out that every single cult leader is a sociopath? Like, we need some studies with this. Like, it's just completely unnecessary and brings us to question the methods that he's using for coming to the conclusions that he comes to, because that's just silly.
Offended by what I'm saying, if you become critical of what I'm saying, if you leave a nasty comment, or you have an inclination to, or whatever, or you have some objections and you want to dispute this, and you have some brilliant arguments for how to argue with me, there's no arguments here. All of that, those are emotional reactions that you have to be conscious of, and all of those equal the proof that you've been looking for. So the proof that you want right now, which you're not getting from me because you're saying that I'm being evasive or whatever, that proof is in your emotional reactions. You have to start seeing at how your ego is deceiving you. Your ego, your psyche, that's what we're talking about here, right?
So basically, I am right because I am right. And if you don't think that I'm right, it's because you are deceiving yourself.
It's frustrating that he doesn't give us the context. Like, we watched the other lady's video, and we just literally watched the whole video, right? We watched a whole lot of it and got a bunch of context. But then we were watching really small clips of Leo where he actually just may be right? I don't know what the context of the thing he's talking about is. So he might be right. I don't know. So it's a little frustrating that he's changed his style with looking at Deepak Chopra and his books and all that stuff, and then changing it to look at spirit science, and then watch the whole video, and then now we're coming to these really, really small clips of Leo. Like, we're just clip chimping here. Like, there's no way for us to, we can't really be taking down a person's whole YouTube channel or their whole internet career based on 30-second clips. with no context because we don't know what he's talking about. We don't know what he's referring to when he's saying that he's just right. And if you're mad, that's proof of it. We don't know what he's referring to. So, not very good.
Cult
point.
leaders always construct ideologies with built-in defense mechanisms so as to be impervious to criticism, kind of like a deity. Speaking of deities...
So right now I'm completely conscious that I am God.
I am God.
And I'm completely conscious of how I'm creating the entire universe. Anything that could ever possibly exist, I am, and it's absolute perfection. Pure infinite consciousness is what I am. I am absolutely everything, and I'm conscious of absolutely everything. I'm completely omniscient. I know everything that's happening in the entire universe all at once, because I am all of it at once.
Is this thing on?
Leo is God.
Oh no. Hopefully he doesn't miss it. Hopefully he doesn't miss it. Everyone is God. Hopefully he doesn't miss it. Everyone is God. And lots of things mean different things than what he thinks they mean. So of course he's not going to be giving the grace of actually paying attention to the meaning of the words that Leo is referring to. He's not going to look at the textbook that Leo is using metaphorically. He's not going to actually dive into the meanings of any of the words and try to understand what he actually means. He's just going to hear some labels and assume that he's a crazy person. I guess it's easy to do, but I mean, he went through the effort of making the video. Maybe he could actually just learn what he means by God, learn who he thinks is God, learn what he thinks is God. Is God limited to Leo personally, or is God everybody? Right? I mean, this is such a basic thing. Everyone is God. You are God. It's one of my one of the sounds for my alert. It's not. It doesn't mean. It's not like it doesn't mean what he thinks it means. Professor Dave.
You heard him right. He is omniscient, even though just 2 minutes prior this happened.
I've been going through a total awakening. Hold on, what is at my door?
Amazon delivery guy.
Yes?
Big meme.
I'm recording here. Thanks.
Are the batteries on this thing?
Funny.
He doesn't know if the batteries are on his video when he's recording it. Our friend doesn't understand what omniscient means in Leo's sense. Because our friend doesn't understand what reality is in Leo's sense here. A lame God who doesn't know who's at the door. Oh no. Well, we don't have to call him lame, do we? Okay.
How an omniscient deity didn't know who was at his door.
I can kind of course, stoop myself down to that level. Really, yeah, in order to communicate with a human, I'm sorry, I mean, this sounds arrogant, but it is what it is. I have to stoop down to your level. You see, I have to think like you, I have to think like a monkey. I have to think like an ego, I have to think like a devil, basically. How does God communicate itself to a devil? That's a devil right there on the end of that screen. Anything disconnected from God is a devil.
Passengers, we have reached cruising altitude. At this point, any rational person would conclude that Leo is identical to any lunatic raving on a street corner with tissue boxes for shoes and a frying pan for a hat.
What? So this is very disappointing because we have Leo who's out here. He's posting a lot of content. He posts a lot of content. He says a lot of stuff. And it seems that you can take a couple minutes out of random clips with no context, no understanding of what any of the words mean, not even attempting to understand any of it, and then, say all these mean things about him. I'm a fan of criticizing Leo. I don't like everything that he says, and I think there's a lot to be criticized about. But, man, it's so disappointing. Like, if a person is just presenting himself to the world, presenting his worldview, trying to build up some system, you take really small chunks of his content, 15 seconds, and just don't even take the time to try to understand any of his words and then dismiss everything. It's just kind of unfortunate. And, one of these things that people do. And it kind of sucks.
and would walk right by having a nice laugh. But try to remember that no one is rational 100% of the time.
Okay.
Some people are more gullible than others, but even highly rational, intelligent people can have their judgment and sense of self diminished through destabilizing events. Some people are vulnerable. Some people follow his instructions to take high-octane psychedelic drugs
Don't do that.
and allow him to shape their reactions to these experiences.
Drugs are bad.
Some people have experienced intense trauma and are susceptible to the tactics of a cult leader like him. This is why most cults start out in the self-help realm. It lures in those who look outwards for answers about themselves.
Maybe. Again, he's doing a little bit of this divining the intentions as opposed to just looking at out of clairvoyance here. Yeah, I mean, he's not just looking at like, he's not actually asking any of the people who are following any of these sort of weird spiritual teachings. He's just assuming that they're all trauma victims, I guess. And he's assuming that they're all irrational, right? As opposed to not limited by rationality. Of course, he wouldn't understand any of this stuff. And then he seems to be saying that Leo was like deliberately going through self-help in order to build up his cult when, you know, he was just into self-help for himself, right? You felt very deluded by holding other people's... Oh, wow, interesting. Got to update that character. Upgrade the character is very important, right? It's not... I don't think that Leo has been deliberately trying to build up a cult by starting with self-help or any of that stuff. He seemed to just like self-help when he was younger, and then he took some drugs. Don't take drugs.
But wait a minute, what if you already have a god?
So truly now, my understanding of awakening has become so rich and so full that I can really appreciate the subtle differences between different teachers and different teachings and different religions and traditions.
Interesting.
And basically what I'm talking about now is a level of awakening that transcends everything, transcends all teachings, all teachers, transcends the Buddha, transcends Christ, transcends every master that you've heard about, transcends Zen, transcends Buddhism, Christianity, Advaita, all of it. All of it becomes like a joke. It transcends the chakras, it transcends meditation, it transcends yoga. There is no way you can reach this level of awakening through meditation, through yogas, through self-inquiry. Nothing.
That's...
I think it's the video we haven't seen yet. This must be the video where he took 5-MeO every day for 30 days or whatever. He came back a little high. Okay, he had some wild claims here. Now, without understanding what he means, I don't know what he's saying, right? He's saying that he's got some deeper understanding than Jesus and Buddha in some particular way, which I'm sure he lays out during the video. But if we don't have that context, we don't actually know what he's saying, right? Like, I have better understanding of physics than Newton. I feel very comfortable saying that. Everyone can probably say that if you've gone through high school physics. That's not a wild claim, right? That's not such a bad claim to make, because we have a better understanding of these things. And maybe you have better understanding of stuff. Jesus and Buddha, and maybe you have a better understanding of Jesus and Buddha by doing some drugs and meditating a little bit better. Maybe, I don't know, but it's very unclear because we haven't heard exactly what the claims are. But we don't know what he's awakened to or what insight he's gathered or whatever language he likes to use. It's a little, again, more frustrating. It's hard to, pajamas, yeah. Nice and comfy in my pajamas. It's a little frustrating to, it's a little frustrating because we don't actually understand what Leo's talking about. We don't know what he's saying. How is he better than these folks? I don't know. What did he do? Well, we know what he did. Took a lot of drugs. But without a reference to that, we can't really say anything more. Like, obviously, I know more about physics than, I can say very confidently, I know more about physics than the Buddha and Jesus and Newton. And probably Einstein? Maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe not. It's not such a wild claim.
That's right, folks. Whatever you worship, it sucks. Leo is better than all gods before him. What does he do
in particular ways?
From this ridiculous state of consciousness, it's possible to do miraculous healing. Only a handful of humans have ever been capable of on the entire planet in the entire history of mankind. And that literally miracles will be possible.
Okay.
I don't know. Sounds kind of Jesus-y to me. So anyway, what's in it for us?
If you're open to that possibility.
I wish he would explain what he meant instead of cutting so much without actually explaining. What does he mean by literal miracles are possible? I don't know.
I can show you every single obstacle that is preventing you from realizing that you're God.
Okay.
Wait a minute.
You're
I'm
God.
God too?
He missed this. Oh no. We did the criticizing earlier, but he completely missed this. This is so weird. Yes, this is a central part of what Leo talks about, right? Everyone is God.
When you do realize that you're God, this will instantaneously solve every single problem in your life. Not only that, but it will heal you. It will heal you of every disease and problem that you have. That's how powerful this is.
Wow, where do I sign up?
So again, this is a very basic sort of thing, and I guess our friend doesn't understand it. We can go through a very simple analogy if anybody doesn't quite understand it. If you are Mario and you're hurt while playing the game of Mario, and then you realize, oh yeah, I'm not Mario. I'm a person holding a controller, sitting in my bedroom, eating Cheetos. You're no longer hurt. You've cured all of your problems. It doesn't mean that the actual level of Mario has changed, right? Mario's health bar doesn't go up, but you are not Mario. You are the person holding the controller. You've been healed. You've been cured, right? In the same sense here, if you find out that you aren't limited to your body, you are cured of all of your diseases. But your body may still be afflicted by whatever diseases. This is like a very basic understanding that most people kind of catch when they understand anybody talking about egos and no self and all this other things that people like to talk about in the spiritual spaces. It's very clear what they mean here. It's pretty simple. And then when you start doing that, you get rid of lots of anxieties and thought loops and all this other stuff that happen in the actual physical body and the normal mind of the brain or whatever, right? Those things fall away, so it becomes easier to address the problems, right? So this is like a twofold part here. You're actually literally cured because you are not you, right? You figure out what you are. You're no longer the body. But then since you are not the body, right, then the body is kind of free to not get caught up in certain things, and it can actually better address its own problems. Does that make any sense? So if we have the grace to actually understand what a person means when they say these things that kind of seem outlandish on the face, we can actually understand that it's not as ridiculous as it sounds. It just means something different. Basically, the default network shuts off. So it's so simple, but yes, the default mode network does change, right? When you're awakened. There are lots of science and stuff. I don't usually get into it, so I don't know a lot about it. But the default mode, there are things that you can do with meditation and with yeah, exactly, with the thought loops, exactly that. So there are things you can do with meditation, and it completely changes your default mode network. You don't fall into fear and anxiety in these thought loops, right? And it makes it much easier and much smoother to actually address the problems that you're facing. Basic stuff. Fairly simple to understand, but apparently we don't give anybody that sort of grace or compassion to actually listen to what they're saying, unfortunately.
By now, we have a pretty firm grasp on what Leo is peddling. So where does this get really dangerous and harmful? Let's take a look.
Death is truth.
Everything
Death
is truth.
is love. Death is infinity.
Everything is love.
Death is God.
Everything is infinity. Everything
Death
is God.
is consciousness.
Everything is consciousness.
Death is selflessness.
Yeah, selflessness.
And what you call life, that's selfishness. That's falsehood.
Falsehood.
That's delusion. That's identification. That's attachment. That's construction.
If you think it sounds like he is glorifying death, you're not the only one.
It does sound like he's glorifying death, but he's talking about ego death, right? Not restricting yourself to a particular limited identification system, right? Again, pretty simple to figure out. I kind of look like Leo. How is that?
Let's hear it a little more clearly.
Okay.
That is otherwise known as physical death. We're asking you to physically die, which of course nobody wants to do.
True.
Which of course is why this stuff stays relatively unknown.
So I feel a little bit weird about he's cutting between different era. You can see the era based on the shirt that he's wearing. He likes to wear a single particular shirt for for most of his videos. So this is like a really early era where he's wearing the black shirt, and the white shirt is a more recent videos. And he just may be referring to different things. I can't tell. I don't know the context, but it certainly does sound like he's glorifying death. But he does also define death in a different way than most people would, which may be important to notice. But it may be hard to detangle. I guess some people might be confused by that, which is a fair enough criticism to understand that it's easily confused language for potentially heavy topics for certain people. Some people think these are important topics or heavy topics, or death is a bad thing or really scary or whatever. So yeah, I guess it's important to criticize, to say that he's using strong language that is easily misunderstood in extreme ways, maybe, but it's not like he's trying to understand in any particular way at all anyway, right? He didn't understand the most basic stuff, so why would it matter if he's not going to understand the basic stuff? He's like trying to misunderstand these things. Maybe I'm going too far by saying that. So why bother using better language, or language that's less confusing or less easily misunderstood, if people aren't going to try to understand it anyway? I don't know.
And one more time.
How do you save a devil?
Less than 3.
Whoa, thanks for subscribing to the stream, Mr. Chop Chop. How you doing, Choppy Chop? Haven't seen you in a while, man. What's up? 10 months in a row, helping keep the stream alive. Much appreciated. Thanks for being here, man. Chilling with the Zen.
In the end, only death will save a devil.
Remember from his rant before, where he points into the camera, the viewer is the devil. Only death will save the viewer. He is actively telling people to kill themselves.
Kill the ego. Very important distinction. Unfortunate, a lot of people don't recognize this, but you want to kill the ego, the thing that you identify as. Stop identifying as that. When you change your identity, you've killed yourself. This is the idea of ego death. People talk about ego death. I don't really talk about it on my stream at all because I don't like that language. But you change your identity. You change what you're identifying as. You identify as the body, the brain, the mind, whatever. You can stop doing that and you can identify with something different. That's ego death. That's killing you. You killed yourself. You've stopped being a devil because you've changed your identity. And I guess to change your identity is not necessarily stop being a devil. To expand your identity infinitely would be to stop being a devil in Leo's language here, because you want to be God. Or maybe to contract your identity so far to nothingness, then it's a similar process. It doesn't really matter. It's a similar thing. But to kill yourself, meaning to change your identity. That is all it means. Change your identity.
Later in this video, he issues a disclaimer stating that nobody should physically harm themselves or others, but it's not enough. Fragile people hear things like this repeatedly, and it affects them. And guess what? Some of them have tried. Here are comments in his forum from some of his followers outlining suicidal thoughts and actual suicide attempts as a direct result of Leo's influence. Prior to COVID...
Dang, he didn't read all. I want to read them, so let's read them.
Guess what? Some of them have tried. Here are comments in his forum from some of his followers outlining suicidal...
All right. Anybody have suicidal thoughts? So I like to say very often here when we are talking about this stuff and we're reading about and we're learning about these things, some of these things may be destabilizing and there are different worldviews, and you don't need to develop in every worldview in the same way, right? So if you're developing in one of the worldviews that Leo talks about, one of them, I guess, would be everything is love and everything is compassion, or everything is cool and everything is God. That's an interesting worldview. You don't need to develop that if that's destabilizing for you. And the other one would be that your experience is all that's real. That's an interesting worldview too, and it could be destabilizing for some people, and you don't need to develop it. And any of these worldviews that go to some sort of position that you don't quite feel is helpful for your current mental state, just don't bother with it. You have other worldviews and you've got other people who teach these things online, and it's completely unnecessary. But let's hear what these folks are trying to say with, what are they saying about killing themselves? Okay. My ex-boyfriend got me into that guy's cult. By the end of the relationship, I could no longer recognize myself. I was losing my mind, literally. It messed me up so much I had to move to Mexico to reset my whole existence in a new country. Leo's a danger to vulnerable people. Okay. Interesting. Okay. Okay. I have a 1-hour drive home. I'm trying to put off killing myself. Millions have died before me and millions will die after I'm gone. I'm going to die one day anyway. So why not get anything done? Okay. I'm not sure what that has to do with Leo's teachings here. It's just being depressed. The only thing that would stop me is if people were real on any level. I wish we all had a soul. I believed in Christianity. Life would be worthwhile, right? So this is a problem that I don't like. Thinking that we need things to be real, right? Having the foundation of reality be a foundation. No, we don't need that. If we don't exist, I don't see the point. People think that they need a point in order to do something. How silly. You can say what you like about the whole thing, but it absolutely is nihilism. I agree, nihilism. Imagine he's going to say nihilism, therefore, right? I could be saying this about myself, but screw God. The ego is a sick joke. The world isn't love and light. It's violent and harsh. Why bother with this monkey suit? Why bother? Why create consciousness if it's happy with itself? Why does every near-death experience talk about people remaining themselves as past is over, not returning to nothingness is all messed up, something, no difference. Slice my arm in 6 places tonight, so screw it. Okay, so he wants to cut himself. Well, it's probably gonna suck. Don't do that. Yeah, please get help. Exactly, right? Please get help. It's pretty simple. I don't know, this first lady, she seemed a little bit upset. This guy seems a little bit desperate here. He's talking about nihilism. The big meme is saying nihilism, well, nothing matters, therefore. Therefore I should kill myself or something like that. It's a big meme. It's a hard thing to deal with if some people are being destabilized by not having any meaning. I don't actually know how to engage on that level because I've never experienced that sort of thing. So get help. I don't know how to say that any better way. Yeah. This probably isn't for you if you're being too brought up, if you need reality to be foundational, if you need meaning to do anything, not quite necessary. Okay. 2 folks having a bad time. Paul again. So is you just showing the same guy? Yes. Paul again gave us another thing. I spoke to a friend who's Christian and she's doing missionary work. She asked me to go to church a few weeks ago. I politely declined. She told me today she'd pray for me, protect me with God to see through the path. She said she prays often. Now I'm skeptical, but who knows? Maybe God is real. Maybe we are souls. Okay. Maybe we are our souls. She says she's going to pray for me and wants me to meet and discuss God. Okay. What do you think? It's late in the UK. I feel better at night. I don't understand what this, it just says how we can abandon the sense of self and the voice in my head. So this doesn't even, I don't know what the point exactly is that he's trying to bring up, but this first part doesn't even, it doesn't support it. This is not anything about him being suicidal. Okay. Hey, y'all know probably you guys know actualize.org, increasing popularity, Verbal getting out there, 99%. Okay, I see this guy back in whatever. He's just, oh my goodness. I'm actually afraid of the existence and reality due to his teachings. I believe I dreamt up my family and my friends my entire life. It's the most depressing stuff I've heard, and for this reason, trust me, the gut feeling is not associated with the ego in any way. We have a bad gut feeling because it's true, maybe? Interesting. I'm not sure if this is substantiating the claim, and I'm not sure, I don't know how much he would have to show in order for it to be a big deal, right? So some people are destabilized by spiritual things. Does that mean that the spiritual thing is necessarily wrong and should be is harmful and should not be taught? I wonder. I'm not sure. Some people are destabilized by Christian stuff. Some people are destabilized by any religious thing. I guess a lot of people would be comfortable saying that all religions should be gone. So I think that'd be fair if they're saying that. Some people find that any sort of normal scientific worldview, deterministic worldview, no souls and that kind of stuff, no magic, would be depressing. Would that be bad to teach also? Some people think that, like moral anti-realism or something like that would be bad to teach. So I'm not exactly sure what he would have to show for it to seem really bad. I can't really get around like showing two people who feel like they want to kill themselves. Why would we blame Leo for that? I mean, people want to kill themselves all the time. And some people do it because of Instagram models. Doesn't mean we need to kill Instagram or stop Instagram. You get the picture. I don't mean to be overly dismissive of the fact here, but some people like to kill themselves, and then some of these people are in spiritual circles. So I don't know what this shows. That's my concern. I don't know what this shows.
Actual suicide attempts as a direct result of Leo's influence. Prior to COVID, Leo was planning a nationwide tour with meetups and mentioned the desire to start a retreat center. So far over the internet, he hasn't been able to physically separate vulnerable people from their support systems. Who knows what he could do in person? So as you can see, actualized.org is a cult. It is one of many cults in this landscape. And what happens when we turn our back?
I wish he defined cults because it doesn't seem to have the, like, if we're going by the BITE model, which is kind of the predominant model for defining cults, it doesn't seem like he fits that exactly. But, we can see some things if we don't quite understand what they're saying, what Leo's saying, or what people who like Leo are saying. Yeah, it sounds kind of bad, and I think we can agree with that. I wish you were a little bit more clear what cults are, though.
Acts to cults? Very bad things. The most insignificant of these would be irreparable damage to the psyche of cult members. Stepping up from there, cult leaders tend to commit rape and other acts of physical abuse.
So this is the problem, right? So he's just saying blatantly that Leo is a cult leader, which is, I think it's a little messed up to say without really defining what a cult is. We don't even see where his cult is, and he hasn't been sheltering people from any sources of information or from their support system and all that stuff. So he's saying he's a cult leader in making, I guess, but he's not a cult leader. He hasn't been doing it yet. And then he's conflating other cult leaders' behaviors with Leo's behaviors. At least he's making that connection by talking about physical abuse and sexual assault, which has not that I know of, ever been brought up about Leo. Maybe he's going to present some extra information that Leo has been physically abusing his followers or sexually abusing his followers. I don't think I've ever heard anything about that. So this is why we don't want to just call people certain bad labels that we don't like.
These people are largely just predatory sociopaths spinning an intricate web of lies to take advantage of others. We tend to mythologize people.
And again, with that, that's the divining intention, as if everybody who has wacky spiritual beliefs are trying to manipulate other people. That's not necessarily the case. Some people just believe it.
People like Charles Manson and convince ourselves that it's something out of a storybook. But there are a lot of people like that, and they do this stuff all the time. And if you want to see just how bad cults can get, look at Scientology. The amount of suffering this cult has caused is immeasurable. Countless lives wasted and families destroyed. What if someone had stopped it decades ago before it got so out of control? Who could argue that precisely this shouldn't have been done? Wow. So why shouldn't we be doing it now to other cults? I don't have the answers regarding this larger goal. It will take a combined effort of many people and cooperation from various federal and private institutions. But in the meantime, all we can do is identify these toxic people and aggressively disempower them in any way we can.
Aggressively disempower people. Wow. In any way we can. Wow. So I wonder if there's like a name for this guy's a cult leader. All right, we don't want to throw that around, but I wonder if there's a name for this phenomena where you just label somebody as bad and then conflate all those bad traits, right? So you just call Leo a cult leader and then assume that he has all the traits of a cult leader when he maybe not literally, he doesn't have all the traits of a cult leader. He definitely doesn't have these traits that he's calling out, like sexual assault and physical assault, because he doesn't meet his fans, apparently. It's such a strange phenomena and it's a little messed up. And it's fairly disheartening. But, I don't know. I've been called a cult leader before. I've been accused of doing lots of things. Personally, I don't think I'm a cult leader. I don't think I'm making enough money to be a cult leader, nor do I have enough followers. Never isolated anybody from anything. But I guess it doesn't really matter. People are still going to make their negative prejudgments. Cannot escape.
To that end, the only way I can help is to offer tips on how to spot misinformation online, such as the false claims of the mystics in this video. As this channel has always been largely academic, beyond the occasional debunk like this one, I've chosen to write a book containing the sort of information we've talked about here today, covering pseudoscience related to fields from chemistry to medicine to physics. It's called Is This Wi-Fi Organic? A Guide to Spotting Misleading Science Online.
And I don't think that's a joke. Literally an ad. This whole video was literally an ad for his book.
If you're interested in getting some tips on how to spot these broader trends, from genuine public confusion to vicious hoaxes and con men, give it a read. Otherwise, I'll see you next time.
You hate to see it, right? People being open with the world, presenting some of their worldview, presenting things that they believe. And nobody takes the effort to actually try to understand any of it. How about that? Do you like good energy? Like, comment, and subscribe for more.